Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere dimly lit and definitely illegal if you're a woman. You're slipping into the shadows of history, past temple guards and drunk gods, to join a secret rite. Because tonight, we're talking about forbidden drinks in forbidden times. And yeah, you probably won't survive this. But hey, if you're going to go out, wouldn't you rather it be with a clay cup of barley wine in your hand? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and the time you're tuning in to. I'm always curious who's night owling with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Sumer, somewhere around 2500 BCE. Dust hangs in the air like history itself. The streets of Ur are low and narrow, lit by flickering oil lamps and shadowed by the mud brick walls. You duck into a low building, no sign, just the scent of fermentation and a low hum of song. Inside it's warm, earthy, loud with laughter, and run by a woman named Kubaba, who doesn't care one bit what the priests think. She's pouring barley beer, unfiltered, murky, served in deep ceramic bowls. You drink it through a long reed straw because, well, floating grain chunks are not the vibe. Around you, women gather. Some serve, some sip, some sing songs to Inanna, the goddess of love, war, and booze. In this moment, women don't just drink. They brew, they own, they rule. In fact, Kubaba isn't just a tavern keeper. According to one strange Sumerian king list, she becomes a queen, a legitimate beer-slinging monarch. Her reign is real, though scholars still debate how she got there. Was she a priestess? A common cit? Just a bartender with ambition and the ear of the gods? No one knows for sure. But what's clear is that here in the cradle of civilization, brewing is women's work. And for a brief golden age, women's drinking isn't forbidden. It's foundational. Until it isn't. You blink, and time shifts. It's still Mesopotamia. But now it's Babylon. Things have changed. There are rules now, strict ones. The Code of Hammurabi thuds down like a clay tablet of doom. Among its 282 laws is a real buzzkill. If a priestess enters a tavern, she gets the death penalty. Not fined, not scolded, executed. You exhale slowly, suddenly aware that your barley brew feels heavier in your hands. So what happened? Well, scholars argue about that too. Some say it's about class. Priestesses were supposed to stay ritually pure, not get tipsy next to travelling merchants. Others say it's about control, because women in taverns meant unpredictability, and unpredictability made kings nervous. Or maybe it was just the beginning of the long, messy history of associating women's drinking with moral collapse. Still, not every woman stops. Not every woman listens. The brewers don't vanish, they go underground. They keep pouring and fermenting behind closed doors, behind veils, behind whispers. You can still hear the songs if you press your ear to the past. Now imagine you're one of them. You're a young Sumerian woman, newly married, still learning the rhythm of household life. You wake before sunrise, crush grain with your bare feet, boil water in clay pots, and chant small prayers to Ninkazi, the goddess of beer. Yes, she has her own hymn. Yes, you've memorized it. And yes, your husband drinks your brew, but when your mother-in-law catches you sipping, she looks at you like you've just invited demons into the house. See, women can make the drink, but drinking it, that's where things get murky. It's sacred when it's served to a god. It's tolerated when it's for fertility rites. But alone, in your kitchen? At night, when the house is quiet and you steal a warm gulp straight from the fermentation jar? That's another story. And the stories begin to swirl. There's a local tale about a woman who drank too much and ran screaming through the streets, naked, cursed by the gods. Another one about a priestess who let a man touch her ankle in the tavern and was never seen again. These aren't just gossip, they're warnings. Wrapped in narrative passed down with side eyes and stage whispers. A woman who drinks too freely is asking for trouble. She's suspect. She's tempting the gods. And worse, the men. But some resist. Some always resist. There are records, uneven and scarce, of women who refuse to give up the cup. One poem hints at a sisterhood of brewers who met under the cover of early dawn, sharing secret brews and stories. Was it real? Was it metaphor? No one can prove it, but you can almost feel it. The quiet rebellion of women who refuse to let their own history be drunk by others. And then there's the fringe theory, the one no respectable historian will say too loudly. that the shift from women-led brewing to male-dominated taverns wasn't just cultural, but conspiratorial, that men saw profit and power in alcohol and slowly, systemically pushed women out. One broken amphora at a time, you take another sip from your reed straw. It tastes bitter now, not just because of the barley, but because you know what's coming. In time, the priestesses retreat, the beer goddesses fade, and by the time Babylon turns to dust, women are no longer the keepers of the drink. They're ghosts in the taverns, legends, warnings, but the whisper never really dies, does it? You leave the Sumerian tavern with sand in your sandals and barley on your breath. The air smells like history, half sour, half sweet. You walk through the night, past gods who've lost their altars, past names chiselled into clay tablets no one reads anymore. And somewhere behind you, you hear the soft clink of ceramic bowls. Someone's still pouring. You step into a new night, and the heat is different now, drier, sharper. Sand crunches under your feet as papyrus reeds rustle in the wind. Welcome to ancient Egypt. The Nile glows with moonlight, silver over black water. Palm trees lean lazily over slow currents, and somewhere in the distance a hippo grunts like it's had one too many. You're here to witness the quiet rituals and loud contradictions of women who drank in a land of gods, gold and grave curses. Beer's still a thing, and so is wine, especially for the rich. Egyptians worship both. Hathor, goddess of music, fertility and joy, is also known as Mistress of Drunkenness. Every year, festivals in her honour involve a literal command to get wasted. No, seriously, it was a sacred duty. Women danced, clapped cymbals, wore beaded wigs, and drank from ornate jars. The goal? To become so drunk they might glimpse the divine. You'd think that would make things pretty chill for female drinkers, right? Not quite. You're a noblewoman now, standing in the colonnade of your father's villa. You're dressed in fine linen, your eyes rimmed in kohl, holding a goblet of date wine. It's sweet and sticky and dangerously strong. You're not supposed to be alone out here with it. The house slaves might gossip, your mother might scold, your brother might report you to a priest, because despite the public orgies of celebration, private drinking, especially by women, still carried a stench of suspicion. There's a tension here, pulsing beneath the hieroglyphs and painted tombs. On one wall, a mural shows a woman lifting a golden cup grinning in a vineyard, but on another, a stern inscription warns, "The woman who drinks too freely brings ruin upon her house." Neat trick, huh? Praise women for drinking when it suits the ritual, shame them for it when it doesn't. The story that echoes loudest in temple halls is one of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war. Legend says she went on a murderous rampage and could only be stopped when Ra, the sun god, tricked her into drinking red-dyed beer, thinking it was blood. She passed out, saved the world, and sobered up into Hathor, the more fun version of herself. But what does that tale really say? That intoxication tames the savage woman? That her wildness needs to be drowned in beer? Scholars debate that story endlessly. Some say it's a myth about balance, others argue it's pure propaganda, a warning wrapped in divine comedy. Either way, it casts a long shadow. Powerful women drink, then regret it. But back in the real world of tombs and taxes, women didn't stop drinking. They just got smarter about it. You're now standing in a quiet back room, a small sanctuary built into the corner of a middle-class home. Clay jugs of wine are stacked behind a linen curtain, perfumed with herbs to mask the sharp smell. This is where wives and daughters gather after market day, when the men are gone, to sip and gossip and maybe, just maybe, share dreams too loud for daylight. And here's something you wouldn't expect. Some of these women can read. They've memorized poems, copied spells, even crafted verses of their own. You listen as one recites a drinking song to the goddess Bastet, purring over the joy of intoxication. Another one passes a carved amulet, an eye of horror, and mutters a joke about it helping her see straight after 2 cups. There's laughter, quiet and full-bodied, like it's stolen from time itself. Still, they're careful. If a neighbour hears and reports them to a temple official, they could be fined, or worse, branded impure. That label lingers like smoke clinging to everything a woman touches. Suddenly she's not marriageable, not trustworthy, not holy, all for a bit of fermented pomegranate juice. Even among the upper classes, drinking is a coded language. In banquet scenes carved into tombs, men raise their goblets with pride, while women are painted smaller, hands demurely folded, cups only half lifted. But archaeologists have found real-life wine jars in women's burial chambers. Some had their names etched into them, so who's lying? The painters or the drinkers? One tomb inscription speaks of a lady named Tiar who loved music and wine and died with joy in her mouth. That's a vibe. Another belonged to Henutawi, a high priestess whose crypt held 30 jars of imported wine. Either she was hosting the afterlife's wildest brunch, or she had a taste for rebellion, or maybe both. There's also the fringe theory that some priestesses used mild hallucinogenic wines to enter trance states, blending intoxication with divination. Modern historians can't agree on this one. There's not enough physical evidence, and it's a little too spicy for mainstream Egyptology. But still, the whispers are there. Sacred spaces, secret brews, visions, warnings. You walk now through a moonlit vineyard in the Fayum region, vines heavy with ripe grapes. A young girl runs between rows, giggling as she carries a ceramic jug. Her grandmother calls after her, "Don't spill the shits!" It's half joke, half prayer. Because in this world, to make drink is to channel power, and women, even when silenced, still carry the recipes. There's a dusty ledger in a museum somewhere that lists a female estate manager supervising an entire brewery. Her workers, mostly women, handled the grinding, mashing, fermenting and storing. It's all there, in faded ink. Output numbers, grain amounts, delivery schedules. But nowhere does it mention if she ever tasted what she made. You wonder if she waited until night, dipped her finger into the jar and licked the foam with a smile. Quiet rebellion tastes like yeast and citrus. You leave the vineyard, walking now beside the great temples of Karnak. Stone columns rise like ribs into the sky. Offerings still sit in niches, dates, honey, small bowls of beer. The stars wheel overhead, slow and eternal. Somewhere a woman lies in bed, eyes open, thinking about the jar hidden behind her bedroom curtain. She'll take a sip when everyone's asleep, just one, maybe two. You know the truth now, that even here in a society with goddesses of drunkenness and songs of wine, women drank in secret. Because celebration is allowed until it isn't. Joy is divined until it's judged. And the night? The night keeps all the best secrets. The air grows saltier as you step forward in time, following the Mediterranean breeze toward marble columns and amphorae stacked high with resin-slicked wine. You're in ancient Greece now, where the men write the philosophy and drink in circles while the women are meant to stay home, aren't they? The scent of olive oil clings to the wind, mixing with roasted lamb and the sour tang of old grapes. You can hear the soft pluck of a lyre in the distance, but if you're a woman, that music is meant to drift through your window, not wrap around you while you drink. Welcome to the symposium, the sacred, exclusive, utterly male drinking party. You peek through a doorway, carefully, because you're not exactly welcome. Inside there's a square room with couches lining the walls. Men recline in tunics, laughing, toasting, quoting poetry, and then immediately undercutting it with crass jokes. There's wine diluted with water, passed in a crater, never full strength because only barbarians drink it raw. One man spins a kylix, a wide drinking cup, playing a game where you fling the last dregs of your wine toward a target on the floor. The prize? More wine, and maybe the attention of the flute girl standing nearby, playing her song like she doesn't hear the lewd remarks tossed her where she's not a guest, she's entertainment, like the dancers, the slaves, and the heterae. Courtesans educated enough to banter with philosophers, seductive enough to pour wine without spilling a drop, and clever enough to survive it all. You're not one of them, though. You're a respectable woman, a wife, a daughter. You're supposed to stay upstairs, managing the loom and the children, boiling lentils, praying to Hera. Drinking? Not your place. Not unless it's a religious festival, and even then your cup better be shallow and your gaze lower. But that's the official version. Now slip through the side streets of Athens, past fig trees and chipped mosaics, into the back room of a modest home. Here, under a low oil lamp, a woman named Thaleia lifts a clay cup to her lips. She's no courtesan, she's a widow, middle-aged, with calloused fingers and a house full of silence. Her neighbours think she's devout, pious, and maybe she is, but once a month when the moon is dark and the city quiet, she hosts her own kind of symposium. The women come quietly, wrapped in dark cloaks. They bring bread, figs, wine, and secrets. They pour diluted wine into shared bowls, just like those men do, and trade jokes that would make an old philosopher blush. They read fragments of Sappho, yes, that Sappho, softly and reverently. They don't spin kylixes, but they do sing. They laugh. Sometimes they cry, and sometimes they just sit in Zen sipping warm wine that smells like freedom. This isn't a party, it's a reclaiming. But they can't call it the hardcore, of course. If a man caught wind of this, especially a Puran husband, or worse, a priest, it would all be over. Because in Athens, a woman caught drunk might be accused of being unchaste, of inviting shame, of tempting the gods or offending the ancestors. One slip, one rumour, and a lifetime of reputation dissolves faster than cheap wine on a hot day. You want a scholarly debate? Here's one. Did ancient Greek women drink in public ever? The official records, written by men obviously, say no, but pottery tells a messier story. Some kylixes show women raising cups in mixed company, lounging beside men, even engaging into the drinking games. Fringe scholars argue these are idealised depictions of hetairai, not real wives or daughters. Others suggest these images reflect rare occasions when social boundaries blurred, like during festivals or funerals. Still others say, we've underestimated women's agency entirely. Take the Festival of the Thesmophoria. It's for women only, no men allowed, and while the official purpose is fertility, the ritual practices are shrouded in mystery. We know they fasted, made offerings, and performed secret rites to Demeter and Persephone. But what else happened out there in those fields? Some accounts suggest wild songs, raw emotions, and yes, copious amounts of wine. Was it spiritual ecstasy or just a break from patriarchal nonsense? Scholars still argue, probably both. You fast forward a bit to a mythic scene. Dionysus, god of wine, madness, and ecstatic liberation, is surrounded by maenads, his frenzied female followers. They dance barefoot, hair undone, covered in ivy and laughter. They drink without shame, howl without permission, and, if the stories are true, tear wild animals limb from limb in their drunken trances. Sounds extreme? That's kind of the point. The maenads weren't role models. They were warnings. A collective male nightmare of what happens when women break free and pour their own wine. Still, some women worshipped Dionysus privately, lighting small altars at home, whispering prayers into the necks of wine jars. You wonder now about the girl who carved a small ivy vine into her cup. Was she praying for release or power? Maybe both. Back in the city, you hear a market rumour. A young bride was caught drinking wine at dusk alone. Her husband claimed she was possessed. The priest declared it a disorder of the womb. She's being sent to her uncle's house in the country for rest. That's what they say. What they mean is exile, shame, disgrace. You follow a street musician now, her cloak threadbare, her voice steady as she sings a hymn to Artemis. Her breath smells faintly of grape. No one cares. She's too low to be judged, too poor to be feared. The upper class doesn't care what she drinks, but you wonder, if she were rich and respected and caught with wine on her breath, would she still be singing? Probably not. You leave ancient Greece with a strange taste in your mouth. The wine was sweet but laced with rules. It touched every lip, but not every life. Men wrote poems about it. Women wrote their names on cups and then hid them. The difference between sacred intoxication and scandalous disgrace. A few inches of cloth, a closed door, and a man's opinion. You walk through the agora one last time. The sun rises, vendors set up, and amphorae clink against one another like a toast you're not invited to. But somewhere, behind a curtain, a woman lifts her cup anyway. Because rules are made by the people who can afford to break them out loud. Everyone else just breaks them in secret. The stones under your feet are smoother now, polished by sandals, time, and ambition. You're walking through ancient Rome, past towering columns and insulae stacked like honeycombs, each holding a dozen lives. The smell is a chaotic mix of olive oil, sweat, smoke, and something roasted that might be goat. Or might not. Either way, you don't ask, you're not here for food, you're here for wine. And you're a woman, so you're going to need to be careful about it. In theory, Roman women don't drink. In practice, they do. They just have to hide it better. You're at a dinner party now, a convivium, the Roman version of the Greek symposium, but with a little more food and a little less philosophy. Reclining is still a thing, but if you're a respectable woman, you're seated upright. You're not really supposed to drink either, though your host has offered you a watered-down cup of Falernian and politely looked away as you took a small sip. Technically it's allowed, just barely, but there's always someone watching, especially the older women, the ones who seem to see through veils and bone. It didn't always used to be this way. Once upon a republic, women could attend feasts, toast the gods, even own vineyards. In the early days, they were front and centre in public life, brewing mulsum, that spiced honey wine stuff, hosting festivals, offering libations to Vesta. But then came the clampdown. You hear the story in whispers. A woman named Ignatia, wealthy and loud, threw a feast where the wine flowed like the Tiber in spring. A senator's wife drank too freely. Someone got too friendly. Scandal erupted. And just like that, the Senate decided to tighten the moral leash. Suddenly, mulieres were banned from drinking wine in public. Not just strong wine, any wine. The penalty, in some periods, as harsh as death. There's a gruesome legend, possibly true, probably exaggerated, about a Roman husband who killed his wife with a cudgel because she was caught sneaking wine from the storage amphorae. When dragged before a magistrate, he shrugged and said, "She drank. That was enough, so it's dismissed." You step back from that memory quickly. It stings, even now, but history is never quite as clean as the laws would like. Because behind those punishments, women kept drinking, in kitchens, in baths, in shrines, and they learned to hide their wine in medicinal tinctures, in cups labelled as water, in little sips taken while no one was looking. You're walking now through a thermopolium, one of those ancient Roman fast food joints. Think counters lined with pots sunken into stone, bubbling with lentil stew and spiced meats. It smells amazing until the rat scurries by. But look closer. See that girl behind the counter, barely 20, pouring watered wine into a chipped clay cup for a traveller who's had a rough day. She wipes her hands on her apron and pours herself a splash too. Quick, casual, she doesn't ask permission, she doesn't need it. She's outside the polite world of matrons and magistrates. Fringe historians argue that lower-class Roman women actually drank more freely than their upper-class counterparts. They had less to lose, fewer eyes on them, and no family legacy to tarnish. So while noble women wrote careful letters and worried about gossip, their working-class sisters laughed over shared cups in alleyways and behind vendor stalls. But it wasn't all so simple. You slip now into a domus, a grand Roman townhouse, mosaic floors cool beneath your bare feet. The domina of the house, let's call her Livia, is hosting a religio feminarum, a women-only rite to honour Bona Dea, the good goddess. Men are strictly forbidden. Even the statue of a satyr in the garden is draped modestly in linen. You're invited in because tonight you're one of them. There's music, soft and droning. Incense curls in the air. Votive offerings sit on every flat surface, honey cakes, garlic, myrtle leaves, and at the centre of it all, large ceramic bowl of spiced wine. Livia offers you a cup. You hesitate, but she smiles, just slightly, and says, "The goddess won't mind." The ceremony is secret, the wine is sacred, but there's no mistaking the release it brings. For a few hours, the rigid world of Roman male dominance softens. Laughter grows louder. The masks slip, and women, daughters, widows, matrons, drink. Then just as quickly, it ends. The bowl is emptied, the songs conclude, and the women return to their roles, chins high, eyes lowered. If anyone asks, no wine was served. Just water. All was just water. You walk now along the Appian Way, under stars so bright they seem sculpted. In the distance, laughter rises from a popina, a working-class tavern where men gamble, curse, and sometimes die. Respectable women don't go there. But you've heard rumours of widows who run their own taverns, of retired courtesans who serve strong drink to grizzled soldiers and know better than to flinch at a fistfight. One woman, they say, even poisoned a rival using her own vintage. She called it her second-best red. No one's confirmed it, of course, but stories like that tend to stick around for a reason. Rome loves its myths, especially when they end in ruin. And that brings you to the debate still raging among scholars. Was the repression of women's drinking really about morality, or was it about fear? Some say the laws were designed to protect women from excess, from shame from themselves. Others argue the opposite, that they were tools of control, ways to keep women quiet, contained, dependent. Either way, the effect was the same. Wine became dangerous for women, not because of what it did to their bodies, but because of what it said about their minds, their desires, their ability to want more than just marriage, motherhood, and modesty. You lean against a stone wall now, watching two matrons leave the market. One carries a basket of figs, the other has something hidden under a folded linen cloth, just a small amphora. They speak quietly, they laugh, maybe it's water, maybe it's wine. Either way, it's theirs, and you begin to understand the pattern. The more women are told not to drink, the more they find ways to do it. Quietly, boldly, carefully, desperately. Because the cup once lifted is hard to set down forever, and the taste of rebellion, it lingers long after the wine is gone. Now the air changes again, drier, hotter, humming with the quiet tension of sand and sky. You're somewhere in the early centuries after the Prophet's time, deep within the rise of the caliphates. Domes curve over sunlit courtyards, water trickles through carved stone fountains, and scent hangs in the air. Cardamom, oud, dates, rose. You're in the heart of the Islamic Golden Age. Baghdad, maybe, or Damascus, or Cordoba, doesn't matter. You're here and you're about to walk a very fine line. Because technically, you shouldn't be drinking at all. Alcohol is haram, forbidden in Islam. The Quran spells it out over several stages, starting with caution and ending in clear prohibition. Public drunkenness is a sin, consumption is a violation. And women? Let's just say the expectations are even tighter. You're to be modest, pious, unseen and unheard. But like all things in history, the rules exist in tension with reality, and the shadows are full of contradiction. Let's start at the top. You're not in a dingy back alley, but inside a palace. The walls are inlaid with geometric tilework that ripples like water. Cushions scatter across the marble floor and sheer curtains sway gently in the breeze. You hear laughter, female laughter. Somewhere, someone's plucking a kanun. You step in further. This is the harem, not the fantasy version sold in bad novels, but the real one. A domestic space reserved for the women of a noble or royal household. Mothers, sisters, wives, concubines, servants. Some are powerful, others are invisible. All are bound together by a web of rules and secrets. And tonight someone's passing around a cup. It's silver, gilded, inscribed with verses by Abu Nuwas, the original party poet. He wrote odes to wine so lush they practically glisten. He also wrote about love, lust, and things that would make any self-respecting imam clutch his prayer beads. Somehow his poetry flourished alongside strict religious codes. That's the contradiction of this era. The court could be devout by day and decadent by night. The cup reaches you. You glance around, but no one looks alarmed. These women are used to the risk. They've done this before. The liquid is dark and sweet, thick with spices, probably date wine, maybe mixed with honey and pomegranate. It tastes like defiance and silk and midnight. You sip slowly. You've never had anything like it. This isn't a drunken brawl. It's a quiet ritual. A gathering of women who know the danger, but drink anyway, carefully. Elegantly, secretly. And here's the strange thing. Some of them are scholars, that's right. This isn't just a room full of idle beauties. Many elite women in the caliphates were educated, some extensively. They copied manuscripts, studied hadith, composed poetry. There's even evidence that a few ran their own intellectual salons. One fringe theory suggests a woman named Lubna of Cordoba not only taught in the royal court, but also translated texts that included medical recipes, some involving fermented tonics. Is that code for wine? Unclear, but possible. Meanwhile, in the bustling streets below, the rules are firmer. If you're a merchant's wife or a tailor's daughter, drinking openly is out of the question. Your hijab is not just a cloth, it's a care act. You're expected to uphold your family's reputation, your husband's honour, your community's values, but people are people, and forbidden fruit is always fermenting somewhere. Behind wooden screens and thick clay walls, women prepare syrups and tonics. Some are medicinal, some are recreational. One woman adds dried raisins and cinnamon to her brew, claiming it helps her sleep. Another insists it cures melancholy. And who's to argue? There's no label, no brand, just a ceramic jar in a kitchen corner and a long silence between sips. There's even a loophole floating around, nabid, a fermented fruit drink that, depending on how long you let it sit, may or may not be intoxicating. Technically, if it doesn't get you drunk, it's okay, but where exactly is that line? No one agrees, which means you can pour a cup and, if caught, swear it was fresh. Just a day old, just for digestion, just for nerves. It's not wine. You insist. This murky space between forbidden and permissible is where women find their freedom. Now you're stepping into a tea house in Cairo, or maybe Fez, somewhere in the 12th century. is bustling, loud with men arguing over poetry and politics. But in a curtained room near the back, a private group of women meets once a week. They sip heavily sugared tea, yes, but also something else. Fermented hibiscus blend, chilled in clay jugs, poured into painted cups. They call it red silk. A few of them veil, others do not. Their faces are flushed, not just from drink, but from talking too fast, too freely. They speak of books, of their husbands' lovers, of dreams they've never told anyone else. And when one of them starts to recite a ghazal, soft and slow, the others lean in. This isn't just drinking, it's release. Here's your historical fact. In some elite Abbasid and Umayyad circles, female musicians known as Kian, often enslaved or concubines, were trained in poetry, music, and yes, courtly drinking. They performed for men and women alike. Some rose to incredible influence. One, named Arab, was so renowned for her wit and singing that caliphs fought over her. She's rumoured to have written her own drinking verses, passed around in secret for decades. Now for a quirky fact, in medieval Persia some women secretly dyed their lips with fermented berry juice, claiming it gave them the mouth of Bacchus. Even though Bacchus wasn't their god, somehow he still slipped in, proof that the idea of wine travels faster than empires. As for the open debate, scholars still argue whether the drinking of these women was widespread or rare, symbolic or actual. There's little direct evidence. Most of it is poetry, metaphor, second-hand stories. But metaphors don't come from nowhere. Where there's smoke, and let's be honest, where there's verse about cheeks flushed by ruby wine, there's probably something bubbling in a hidden jug. You're walking through a moonlit courtyard now. The stars above are sharp, the shadows long. Somewhere, a fountain trickles lazily. A woman leans against a pillar, her silk robes damp with heat, a half-finished cup beside her. She stares into the night, lips stained dark, and hums a tune no one else remembers. History won't record her name, it rarely does, but tonight you know she existed, and that's something. You're in Europe now, though you wouldn't know it by looking around. The thick stone walls of the convent block out the sun, and the air smells like wax and wet wool. A bell tolls somewhere in the distance, slow, deliberate, like it's bored with its own holiness. You're inside a medieval cloister, surrounded by women in habits who are supposed to be praying, chanting, and embroidering crosses into everything that doesn't already have one. And yet, someone's brewing beer. It's early morning, and the kitchen is already warm. You pass through a heavy wooden door and find Sister Margarita standing over a steaming copper kettle, stirring with a paddle as long as your arm. She doesn't flinch when you enter. She just wipes her brow and says, "Hand me the hops, will you?" And you do. Because honestly, she looks like she could bench press the abbess. Yes, nuns brewed beer. Not just occasionally. Not just as a quirky hobby. They brewed a lot of beer. In medieval Europe, monastic orders were not only spiritual centres, they were also economic powerhouses, and many women's convents became self-sufficient breweries. Beer was cleaner than water, more nutritious than soup, and, let's be real, a whole lot more fun than silent prayer. The beer they brewed wasn't for drunken revelry, of course. Officially, it was for sustenance, liquid bread, something to get you through long fasting days and brutal winters. But unofficially, let's just say a few extra sips were taken in the name of quality control. Sister Margarita hands you a clay mug filled with warm, unfiltered ale. It's cloudy, earthy, and oddly comforting. "Don't worry," she says, "God made barley too." Still, there's tension. While brewing was accepted as part of the convent economy, drinking was a different story. There are letters from bishops, stern, condescending letters, warning nuns against excessive enjoyment of the drink. Some rules limited them to 1 mug per day, others banned brewing altogether if it led to distraction, and yet records show those restrictions were often ignored. One abbess in Germany reportedly increased ale production after complaints, arguing that sober sisters are slow sisters. Now step outside the cloister walls, into the world of laywomen. Here, in the cold grey mornings of the early Middle Ages, women dominate brewing culture. They are called alewives, and they run small household-scale operations, boiling mash, fermenting wort, hanging a broomstick over their door when the batch is ready. That broom is the original sign of a brewer. You visit a village and find Gertrude, an alewife with a crooked smile and arms like tree branches. Her hands move fast as she pours you a drink from a horn cup. It's warm, sharp, flavoured with bog myrtle and nettle before hops became common. She sells this to neighbours, passers-by, even local monks, she's respected, feared, and occasionally blamed for everything from hangovers to spoiled marriages. Then the tide turns. As towns grow and guilds form, brewing shifts from a home industry to a male-dominated profession. Suddenly, alewives are inconvenient. Competition, their reputation sours like bad mash. Whispers spread. They're unclean, greedy, maybe even dangerous. You hear rumours, a woman who added pig's blood to her ale for better foam, another who cursed a customer for not paying and his crops died the next week. No one can prove anything, of course, but the stories stick. You blink, and suddenly it's no longer just gossip. We're entering witch hunt territory now. That broom over the door? Suddenly it's not a sign of beer. It's a witch's ride, the tall conical hats alewives wear so customers can spot them in the market. Now they're witch hats, the cats they keep for chasing mice from grain stores. Familiars. Just like that, centuries of female brewing knowledge become suspicious, dangerous, demonized. A fringe theory suggests the persecution of witches was, in part, a systematic dismantling of female brewing authority. No more backyard barrels, no more broomsticks. Men wanted beer and they wanted it institutionalized, controlled, taxed. But let's not skip over the monasteries just yet, because even as male monks expanded their own massive brewing operations, complete with cellars, distribution systems and secret recipes, many female convents kept up. Some were so renowned for their brews that nobles ordered barrels as tribute. In one case, a royal court allegedly accused a group of nuns of diluting their ale, not because it was weak, but because it was too strong. The scandal made it into local gossip and, weirdly, into 2 separate Latin poems. You'd be amazed how much poetry exists about drunken nuns, which brings us to another scholarly debate. Did nuns drink more freely than laywomen during this era? Some say yes, because they were isolated from men, and thus outside normal patriarchal scrutiny. Others argue the opposite, that their religious vows made them targets for stricter enforcement. The answer, of course, is probably both. It depended on the convent, the country, the bishop, and how good the beer was. You walk now through the shadowy hallways of an Irish abbey. The floor is cold under your feet. A sister passes you, face hidden set beneath her hood, carrying 2 bottles wrapped in linen. She gives you a look, not stern, not kind, just knowing. Later that night you sneak into the refectory. Candles flicker low. A half-finished bottle sits beneath the altar. You take a sip. It's sharp. Fermented apples and something else. Juniper, you're not sure. But it tastes like disobedience aged in oak. Outside, the night air is crisp. Stars blink overhead like the eyes of saints too tired to judge anymore. You hear laughter from the kitchen again. Soft, contained, but very real. A reminder that behind the hymns and robes and polished wooden pews women lived, drank, dreamed. Sometimes all at once. You wonder how many recipes were lost to fire, to scandal, to silence. How many prayers were whispered into brewing pots, how many hands were slapped for tasting too early, and how many cups were raised in pure, quiet rebellion. The monastic bell rings again. It's time for morning prayers, but in the corner of the cellar there's a batch that still needs stirring. The fire's lower now, but hotter, closer to your skin. You're somewhere in Europe still, but the centuries have ticked forward. It's the late Middle Ages, and the witch hunts are warming up like a bad stew left too long over coals. You walk past a cart rolling down a muddy street, its wheels caked in the same brown slush that spatters your shoes. Overhead, the sky is grey and taut like someone forgot to finish painting it. And hanging above the tavern's door? A bundle of broom twigs tied with red ribbon. You know what that means. Alewife, though. Or witch, depending on who you ask. You push open the tavern door and step into the dark. It smells like yeast, old wood, sweat and fear. A woman stands behind the bar. Not young, not old, just sharp, sharp eyes, sharp tongue, sharp ladle. Her name's Marta. She's been brewing beer in this town for 2 decades, and she'll cut you with a glance if you ask her what she puts in it. She's got a way with herbs, that one. She knows how long to steep mugwort, how to balance Groot before hops took over everything. She doesn't need a recipe, just a feeling, and maybe a dream or 2. Tonight, her tavern is full, men drinking, playing dice, slamming down pewter cups. Some nod to her with respect. Others won't meet her eyes. It's safer that way, because Marta's not just known for her beer. She's known for her temper, her bad luck. For the fact that when the miller's wife got sick, she was the last one to deliver soup, that when the baker's child died in the spring, Marta had argued with him the day before. Coincidence? Probably. Doesn't matter. The whispers have started. She's got a cat, she talks to her brewing pots, she sings while she stirs, doesn't look good. You walk with her later that night to her small cottage on the edge of the woods. Inside, it's warm and clean and full of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. You sit at her table while she pours you a thick, dark ale. There's something in it. Nutmeg? Honey? You're not sure, but it's strong and comforting, like drinking a wool blanket. Marta talks in a low voice. Not scared, just tired. She's seen 3 women burned in the next village over. One of them used to brew like her. They said she cursed a man's barley crop because he wouldn't pay for his keg. They said she danced in the fields at night. They said her beer made men dream strange dreams. Marta doesn't deny it. She just shrugs. If dreams are evil, then so is sleep. Now here's the historical truth. Many of the early women accused of witchcraft in Europe were brewers. Not all, not even most, but a suspicious number. They had access to tools, big cauldrons, ladles, herbs, boiling water. They handled plants that could soothe pain or, if used wrong, end a pregnancy. They knew things women weren't supposed to know unless they were midwives, healers, or saints. And saints don't sell beer. One of the most curious facts. That image of a witch flying on a broomstick. Some historians trace it back to alewives. The broom wasn't for flying, it was hung outside to signal that a fresh batch was ready. And the pointy hat, just a practical way to stand out in a crowded marketplace. You needed to be seen to make a sale. Unfortunately, standing out in history usually comes with consequences. There's another story, probably apocryphal but too delicious to skip, about a woman in the Rhineland who brewed a batch so strong that 3 men passed out in the middle of a church procession. When questioned, she claimed it was blessed by St. Bridget herself. The bishop didn't buy it. She was fined and forced to dump her barrels into the river. Locals swear the fish were drunk for days. Now let's talk about hops. Up until now, beer was flavoured with Groot, a blend of herbs often mixed by women. But hops were cheaper, preserved better, and, more importantly, were regulated by the church and crown. Suddenly, beer shifted from women's work to men's business. Alewives were pushed out, taxed harder, and accused more frequently of cutting corners or poisoning customers. Some historians suggest the rise of hops marks the end of women's dominance in brewing. A slow squeeze, not with a noose but with a tax document and a regulation scroll. Still, not all women faded away. In some regions they fought back quietly, of course. They brewed under other names, hid their barrels behind barn walls, passed recipes to daughters and granddaughters under cover of bread baking. One German family preserved a yeast strain for 400 years without ever writing it down. The matriarchs just whispered the timing into each other's ears, like a secret language of bubbles and warmth. You walk through the town square now. It's colder, harsher. There's a post set up in the middle, not for decoration, for punishment. One woman stands in the stocks, wet hair, mud on her dress. The townsfolk say she sold sour ale. Others say she sold more than that. Either way, she's being corrected. Not by the law, by the people. And that's the problem, really. You don't need a law to kill a woman. Just suspicion. Just a rumour. Just a whiff of alcohol on her breath and a man with a grudge. In one French village, a woman was accused of bewitching the wine. Not poisoning it, bewitching it. Making it too good, drawing men to her tavern instead of the others. That was enough. And so it goes. You step back into Marta's cottage. She's asleep now, curled in a chair, cat on her lap. The fire burns low. A pot of wort simmers quietly in the hearth. Tomorrow's batch just beginning to take form. You dip your finger in. It's bitter, warm, and just starting to bubble. She's still brewing, still risking, still daring to make something that brings comfort in a world that offers so little of it. Outside, a breeze kicks up. The broom over her door sways in the wind. Not a curse, not a spell, just a signal. There's drink inside, if you're brave enough to come in. The air is suddenly heavy with incense and pine, and the world sharpens into order. You're in Japan now, feudal Japan, somewhere in the Edo period around the 18th century. Everything is cleaner, quieter and stricter. The streets are swept, the lanterns lit, and the rules carved into everyone's posture. Women bow just a little lower, speak just a little softer, and definitely drink just a little more secretly. Sake is everywhere. You can smell it even now, sweet, slightly sour, with a whisper of rice husk. It seeps out of every corner of the culture, from imperial rituals to rowdy festivals, but just because it's everywhere doesn't mean everyone can drink it. Especially not you if you're a woman born into the wrong class or the wrong role. That's what makes what's about to happen so interesting. You're walking through the back streets of Edo, now Tokyo, beneath strings of red paper lanterns that bob gently in the wind. You pass a sake shop, its entrance marked by a ball of cedar branches called a sugidama, hanging like a green promise. That's how you know the new brew is ready. A few men stand outside, already half drunk, slurring praise for the brewer's touch. You keep walking. Tonight, you're headed to a tea house, but not for tea. You slip through a curtained doorway into a softly lit room, tatami mats on the floor, a shoji screen casting patterns of light and shadow, and in the centre, kneeling with the perfect poise of a lifelong performer, is a geisha. Her kimono glows like lacquer, and her hair is arranged like architecture. But she's not here to be gazed at. She's pouring sake. This is where women drink, if they're clever, if they're trained, if they know how to hold a cup and a secret at the same time. The geisha hands you a porcelain cup no bigger than a thimble. The sake is warm, not hot, not cold, just warm enough to coax out the layers. You take a sip. It's smooth, almost too smooth. She watches your reaction carefully, not for approval, but for safety. You're not the first outsider here, and you won't be the last. Drinking for women in this period is a tangled web. Public drunkenness is shameful. Private drinking is frowned upon unless it's part of a ritual. But geisha exist in a strange in-between. They are not wives, not courtesans, not quite allowed, and yet unavoidable. They drink with customers, for performance, for art, for connection, but rarely, if ever, for themselves. That's the unspoken rule. Still, when the clients leave and the lights dim, sometimes the bottle stays. You stay late, watching as the laughter fades and the geisha slowly sheds her stage voice. She refills her cup just a little and drinks. Her shoulders drop. She leans back against the wall and sighs. One of those sighs that sounds like it's been waiting to escape for hours. She says nothing, but the silence says plenty. Then she whispers about another woman, a samurai wife, who drinks every night in her garden, alone, under a persimmon tree. Her husband's always away, busy with politics or poetry or swordplay. The sake keeps her warm, keeps her sane, and no one knows but the maid who brings her the bottle. This isn't a scandal, it's just reality, carefully folded away like everything else. Because in Edo, Japan, women are expected to be calm, contained, composed. Alcohol threatens all of that. It loosens tongues, swells laughter, interrupts obedience. So even when women do drink, they're expected to maintain a delicate balance. Tipsy, never drunk, warm, never loud, amused, never angry. But of course, that's not always how it goes. You find yourself next in a rural village, far from the cherry blossom fanfare of the capital. The women here work hard, planting rice, weaving fabric, raising children who barely look up from their tasks. At night, after the work is done and the men have passed out in a haze of cheap doburoku, cloudy home-brewed sake, the women gather. They drink too. No geisha poses here. Just clay cups, rice crackers, and quiet cackling that rises like steam into the night. They share gossip, dreams, complaints. One of them tells a story about a friend who got drunk and told off her mother-in-law. Savage stuff. Everyone gasps and laughs and wishes they had the courage. Then someone pours more sake. And they go quiet again, sipping and listening to the wind outside. You ask yourself now, was this common? Did women really gather like this? The scholars aren't sure. Some say it was rare. Others insist it was hidden in plain sight. Domestic records show plenty of sake consumption by women, especially during festivals and seasonal changes. But official history? Mostly silent, because the records were kept by men, and women drinking wasn't worth ink, unless it became a problem. There's one account, half legend, half police report, of a noblewoman who drank herself into a rage and rode a palanquin straight through the market, shouting poetry and insults at stunned merchants. Her family claimed it was illness. The public called it a scandal. The truth? Lost in translation. Still, some women drank with power. Empress Shotoku, for instance, was known for her religious devotion. But a few fragments suggest she also had a taste for ritual drinking. Not scandalous, because it was spiritual. But let her servant do the same, and it would have been a different story. And here's a quirky fact for you. In some parts of Japan, pregnant women were encouraged to sip sake during certain rites, just a few drops, offered to the gods for strength and safety. They weren't supposed to swallow, but many did. Call it divine disobedience. The open debate among historians, whether female sack consumption was ever truly accepted or just tolerated in ritual form. Was it culture or necessity, performance or pleasure? The line is thin and often blurred, like the cup you just finished, which somehow keeps refilling even though you swore you were done. You walk through a garden now, gravel crunching softly under your feet. The moon hangs above a small pond, mirrored and slightly distorted. A woman kneels near a stone lantern, cradling a small sake flask in her hands. She sips. She breathes. She doesn't see you, but even if she did, she wouldn't stop. This is her moment. She has followed every rule today, folded every kimono crease, prepared every meal, bitten every tongue. But this sip, this one is hers. You keep walking, the scent of rice and plum trailing behind you. Somewhere a cricket chirps. Somewhere else a secret is kept in a cup that no one will ever find. The lanterns are different now, silk instead of paper, shaped like lotus flowers and glowing soft pinks and golds. You're in imperial China, somewhere between the Tang and Song dynasties, stepping through a cityscape that thrums with quiet elegance and unspoken rules. Narrow alleys branch off from wide, crowded avenues, and above them banners ripple with calligraphy. Perfume clings to the air, jasmine, sandalwood, faint traces of smoke. And somewhere behind all that decorum, women are pouring wine, not just drinking it, serving it, singing with it, writing about it, whispering through it. You follow a trickle of music to a kilo, one of those covered walkways above the street that connect rooms you're never supposed to enter. There's laughter upstairs, low and rhythmic, like it's been rehearsed. You slip inside and up the stairs. The noise swells. Welcome to a huayuan, a flower garden tea house, though tea is only part of the story. These are elite pleasure quarters, filled with courtesans who are smarter than you, sharper than you, and trained to drink just enough without ever appearing drunk. It's a performance, every gesture choreographed, the way the cup is tilted, the way the sleeve falls just so, the way a single eyebrow rises at the perfect punchline. Your hostess tonight is Mei Lin, and she's a professional in every sense of the word. Her hair is pinned high with gold and jade, her silk robe shimmers like ripples on the canal outside. She's beautiful, yes, but it's her eyes that hold you. They're clever, fast, slightly amused. You're a novelty to her, and she enjoys novelty. She pours your first cup herself, clear ice wine from a porcelain bottle painted with cranes. It's warm and fragrant, with a bite that sneaks up on you. She lifts her own cup but doesn't drink, not yet. She waits to see how you handle yours. Here's the thing, in Imperial China, drinking is highly ritualized. There are rules. You toast in order of rank, you down the cup if challenged, you don't overstep, you never get drunk before the men do, and if you're a woman outside this tea house world, drinking can be dangerous in a whole different way. Respectable women, wives, daughters, widows are bound by Confucian ideals of modesty and restraint. A woman drunk in public is not just shamed, she's dismantled. Her reputation doesn't bend, it snaps. And yet behind closed doors the rules soften. In the inner chambers of wealthy households, drinking among women is quietly tolerated. It happens during festivals, during poetry readings, during those long candle-lit nights when the husband is away on business, or with another wife. Women gather in painted courtyards and exchange verses while sipping jiu, wine brewed from millet, rice, or plums. They toast each other softly, eyes darting toward the door with every clink of the cup. Some even write about it. One of the most remarkable voices of the Song dynasty is Li Qingjiao, a poet whose verses drip with longing, memory, and, yes, wine. She wrote openly of drinking to forget sorrow, to chase beauty, to touch something just out of reach. In one poem, she describes getting drunk alone while plum blossoms fall outside her window. It's intimate and aching, and it scandalized the scholars, of course. The open debate among historians is whether women like Li Qingjiao were exceptions or representatives of a hidden norm. Some claim she was uniquely bold, wealthy enough, educated enough, widowed enough to get away with what others couldn't. Others argue her poems reveal a broader truth, that educated women were drinking, feeling, longing, and writing it down, even if no one dared read it. Back in the tea house, Mei Lin finally lifts her cup. She drinks, not much, just a sip, and then launches into a song. Her voice is low, hypnotic, curling around each syllable like smoke. The lyrics are old, something about spring wine and broken plum ears. But her delivery is timeless. Everyone in the room goes still, watching as if they've forgotten how to blink. This is a different kind of power. Not loud, not public, but undeniable. Later, when the guests have stumbled out and the screens have been slid shut, you sit with Mei Lin on the veranda. The canal reflects the stars. She pours another round, this time for herself. No audience, no rules. She leans back, hair loosened, robe sliding off one shoulder, and says, "They think we drink for them, but sometimes we just drink for ourselves." You believe her. Out in the countryside, it's a different story. You walk through a farming village where women brew their own rice wine in clay jars tucked behind their homes. The process is passed down from mother to daughter, never written down. These women don't toast or compose poetry. They drink while cooking, while arguing, while laughing through missing teeth and empty rice sacks. It's not sacred, it's survival. There's a superstition here, that rice wine brewed during a thunderstorm turns sour. That if a woman brews while angry, the spirits in the fermentation jar will turn their backs and refuse to bless the batch. It's not scientific, but they follow it. They always follow it. A quirky fact. In some parts of China, during certain festivals, women were allowed, expected even, to get drunk in public. The Double Ninth Festival, for instance, involved hiking to high places, drinking chrysanthemum wine, and contemplating mortality. It sounds poetic, but it also offered a rare sanctioned space for women to feel lightheaded in the open air. One old text mentions a widow laughing so hard on the hilltop that her comb fell into the wind. No one shamed her, not that day. Still, the tension remains. For every sanctioned sip, there's an unsanctioned judgment. And behind every polite tea gathering is a flask wrapped in silk and hidden in a drawer. You step now into a scholar's home where a woman lights a lamp and unfolds a scroll. She dips her brush into ink, writes a line of verse about moonlight, and then takes a quiet sip of aged plum wine. Her husband is away, her children are asleep, no one will ever read this poem, but she'll write it anyway, because drinking is more than rebellion. It's ritual, memory, magic, a way to feel something, name it, and then let it float away on the steam of the next warm cup. You leave the tea house, the village, the scholar's chamber. The night smells like incense and rain. Somewhere behind a painted screen a woman pours another drink, and no one, not even history, knows about it. The streets are louder now. Horse hooves clatter over cobblestones, and you hear the clink of metal buckles, the rustle of velvet, the low murmurs of court gossip tucked behind fans. You're in early modern Europe now, somewhere in the 16th century, though it shifts depending on which city gate you walk through. Florence, Madrid, London, maybe Prague. Renaissance art is blooming on chapel ceilings, philosophers are dueling with quills, and everywhere you go, someone's trying to pretend they're sober. But let's not pretend. Tonight, we're in a salon, because where else would you go to find clever women drinking in secret and in style? The air inside is thick with perfume and candle smoke. The walls are lined with tapestries and books bound in leather no one actually reads. A fireplace crackles in the corner, throwing golden light across the polished floor. And here, nestled in embroidered chairs and skirts that seem to defy physics, sit the ladies of the house, talking, laughing, sipping. The wine is Spanish, rich and dark with a mouthful of secrets. One of the women is reading aloud from a letter she definitely wasn't supposed to open. Another is quoting Ovid with a wink. These are noble women, yes, but they're also human, and they found a loophole in the system. If you make drinking look like intellectual activity, no one stops you. It's a fine line to walk. Because women in Renaissance Europe aren't supposed to drink freely. In public, it's a stain on their character. In private, it's a stain on the tablecloth if anyone finds out. Drinking is still tied to virtue, to chastity, to being the kind of woman who inspires a sonnet, not the kind who gets named in a divorce petition. But in these salons, behind closed doors and beneath the clatter of court intrigue, women sip anyway. They call it medicinal. They call it poetic. They call it fortifying for the nerves, which is polite code for, if I don't drink something, I will scream. And it's not just wine. In one corner, a woman offers a small glass of aqua vitae, distilled spirits, clear and shockingly strong. She swears it's for her digestion. You take a sip and feel it burn all the way down, lighting up your spine like a secret you've been holding too long. She pours you another, just to be sure you're properly balanced. Here's the thing. The Renaissance loves contradictions. It adores beauty but fears female desire. It celebrates humanism but still treats women as decorative furniture. A woman who drinks is bold, but boldness in a woman is a problem unless she's a queen. Then it's fine, sort of. Take Catherine de Medici, Queen of France, political genius, absolute menace in pearls. She drank wine like it was water and brought her own Italian winemakers with her when she married into the French court. Some say she also brought recipes for herbal cordials and liqueurs, brewed in secret, passed down by noble women who understood the fine art of discretion. Of course, her enemies painted her as a poisoner. Because what else do you call a woman who mixes herbs, drinks from a flask, and doesn't apologise? Meanwhile, you step into the kitchen of a middle-class English home. The lady of the house is supervising supper, shouting over a servant who burned the pie again. She grabs a pitcher of ale, not to serve, but to drink herself. It's her fourth today. She doesn't count. No one does. Ale is seen as food here, a staple, safer than water, filling, comforting. But even so, there are rules. Respectable women are expected to drink lightly, quietly, never enough to show it. But then, here's the twist. They're also the ones making it. Like in earlier centuries, brewing in Renaissance households is still often women's work. They control the recipes, the yeast, the timing. Some even sell their extra batches in local markets. It's a skill, an economy, a power. But the power is fragile, because if she brews too much, earns too much, or smiles too wide while pouring, suddenly she's suspect. A story floats around town, half warning, half scandal, about a brewer's wife named Agnes who ran her own ale stall. Her drink was too strong, her laugh too loud, her skirts too fine. One Sunday morning, the vicar said her ale tempted men away from the Lord. By evening, her stall was gone. The church says temperance is holy. The men say drunk women are dangerous. The women say nothing, because it's safer, but not all of them. Back in the salon, one woman pulls out a small notebook. She's writing a poem. Something about grapes and freedom. She's not published. She won't be. But she writes anyway, in ink made from crushed berries and iron dust. She sips as she writes. Her fingers are stained. Her words are sharp. Scholars today argue about how common this was. Did elite women drink in secret, or was it more tolerated than we think? The records are unreliable. Women's voices filtered through male scribes, if they were recorded at all. Some researchers point to letters and diaries that mention ladies' suppers, where wine flowed and philosophy danced across the table. Others claim those were rare, exception wrapped in privilege. And then there's the fringe theory, that some salons were proto-feminist spaces, cloaked in elegance but driven by defiance. Drinking, in this view, wasn't just indulgence. It was a protest, a refusal to be saw and restored, a slow-burning rebellion in a crystal cup. You walk now through a market square. A washerwoman drinks from a flask hidden in her apron. A midwife shares a warming cordial with a nervous bride. A noblewoman slips a few drops of wine into her tea during a public recital. 3 women, 3 classes, 1 truth. The cup finds its way. You return to the salon one last time. The fire has burned low, the laughter dimmed, but the bottles are still half full. The hostess stands, smoothing her skirts, and raises her glass for a final toast. To liberty, she says, with a smile that dares you to misunderstand her. They all drink, quietly, proudly, together, because sometimes rebellion is velvet-lined and candlelit, and it smells like wine. You hear the creak before you see the light, wooden floorboards groaning under boot heels, the flicker of a lantern swaying in the night, and the distant hoot of an owl that somehow sounds judgmental. You're in early colonial New England now, and everything is tighter, tighter morals, tighter corsets, tighter lips. The Puritans have arrived, and with them comes an unrelenting thirst for virtue, and, ironically, cider. Yes, cider, lots of it. This is a world built on godliness and governance, on sermons that go on for hours, and public punishments designed to humiliate you back into holiness. But despite all the repression and hellfire threats, alcohol is very much present, especially hard cider, the drink of choice in a land too cold and too wild for grapes to grow reliably. It's made from apples, pressed in barrels, and consumed daily even by children. It's not taboo, not technically, unless you're a woman drinking too much. Then it becomes a problem, a sin, a scandal, a warning to others. You walk into a modest timber-framed house lit by a single rushlight. The air inside smells of wool, lard soap, and simmering beans. At the table sits a woman named Rebecca, hair pulled tight beneath a linen cap, hands rough from endless labour. Her children are asleep. Her husband's away, trading or preaching or just avoiding her, she doesn't know anymore. And in front of her, a mug of cider. It's warm, faintly tart, and it helps, not just with the cold but with the ache, the silence, the feeling that this life, this endless churn of duty and deference, might just drown her if she doesn't carve out a moment that's hers. She drinks slowly, carefully. She's not foolish, she knows what happens when people talk. In New England, public drunkenness is punished harshly, and for women, the consequences are more than a fine or a night in the stocks. It's social death. You become a cautionary tale. Sister Abigail was found singing at her window after dark, they whisper. Too much cider, perhaps. They say it with pity, but also with glee, because what's better than watching someone fall out of line? Still, Rebecca drinks, and she's not alone. Here's the odd twist of the era. Women are deeply involved in alcohol production. They're the ones making the cider, fermenting the ale, even distilling small batches of spirits in some cases. It's part of their domestic responsibilities. Just like churning butter or baking bread. They measure yeast by touch, flavour by instinct. They know how to test for sweetness, acidity and strength, all without ever lifting a glass in public. It's one thing to make it, another to enjoy it. At community gatherings, harvest festivals, quilting bees, weddings, alcohol flows, women drink, but only in moderation, or at least they pretend to. Behind the barn, after the children fall asleep, the laughter gets a little louder. The cider gets poured a little more freely, and somewhere in the darkness, a woman like Rebecca lets her hair down, literally, and feels just a bit like herself again. Meanwhile, the sermons rage on. Ministers preach about the perils of indulgence, about how Eve was tempted, and how women's weakness is the gateway to sin. They warn that alcohol loosens tongues and morals, and a woman with either is a threat. There's one particularly fire and brimstone preacher who writes in his diary about a wretched creature found drunk at a town gathering, a she-devil with rosy cheeks and slurred speech. No name, just condemnation. And yet, his diary also includes cider recipes. Interesting. You step into a village tavern now, low-ceilinged and noisy, filled with pipe smoke and the smell of roasted meat. Women aren't banned here, not officially, but they're certainly discouraged. You're met with stares. Curious, cautious. A barmaid moves between tables, dodging hands and biting back remarks with a practiced smile. She pours mugs of strong cider and watery ale, never taking a sip herself. But if you follow her back into the kitchen, you'll find a cup hidden near the hearth, half full and still warm. Even barmaids need a break. There's a fringe theory that some of these women, especially the widows and the poor, drank not out of rebellion, but necessity, to numb hunger, to fight the cold, to dull the ache of being invisible. The records don't say it outright, but every now and then, a court document appears. Widow found intoxicated, no family to restrain her. That's all it takes. No further questions. Scholars debate the true frequency of women's drinking in colonial times. Some claim it was rare, tightly controlled by social expectations. Others point to the sheer volume of cider produced, barrels and barrels of it, and argue that women had more access than we assume. They just had to hide it, like everything else. Here's a quirky detail. In some Puritan households, young girls were given small doses of cider daily for health. It was believed to settle the stomach, encourage digestion, and ward off melancholy. The irony is sharp, liquid repression served with breakfast. But women remember, and they adapt. You find yourself now in a cramped attic bedroom. A girl of 16 sits near a candle, writing in a threadbare journal. She's documenting her day, sewing, cooking, tending her younger siblings. At the bottom of the page she adds, "Had a taste of cider from mother's bottle. Burned. Made me laugh. Just that. One line, a tiny act of rebellion in faded ink." Downstairs her mother is pacing. Her husband criticised dinner. The baby cried all through prayers. The fire won't catch. She lifts the bottle from behind the flour sack and takes a sip. Just one, maybe two. And suddenly her shoulders drop. The tension leaves her jaw. She's not trying to escape, just trying to breathe. You leave the house and walk through the frozen street. Smoke curls from chimneys. Somewhere a fiddle plays. Somewhere else a woman sighs behind closed shutters, her hands wrapped around a warm cup she would never admit to owning. Because in Puritan New England, sin is what you do in public, and survival is what you do in secret. The road ahead turns rough and wide, rutted with wagon tracks and scattered with hoof prints. Dust coats everything, even the sun. It hangs thick in the sky, like flour sifted over the frontier. Welcome to the American West, where the whiskey is warm, the men are wild, and the rules for women are as unpredictable as a bucking horse on Sunday. You're in a frontier town now, could be Deadwood, Tombstone, Dodge City, doesn't matter. Every one of them smells the same. Smoke, sweat, leather, blood, and the faint sour tang of bad liquor. The saloons are open, loud, impossible to miss. Music spills from swinging doors, laughter fights with gunshots, and the barkeep knows more secrets than the preacher. But this place, like so many, doesn't know what to do with a woman who drinks, not a working woman. The saloon girls, the soiled doves, the barmaids, they drink because they have to, because customers expect it, because it makes things easier to forget. But if you're a decent woman, a schoolteacher, a ranch wife, a preacher's daughter, that cup in your hand is a scandal in the making. You step inside a saloon anyway, it's not your first time. Men look up as you walk in, boots clicking against the warped floorboards. The piano falters for half a beat. You make your way to the corner table where the light is low and the judgment duller. The bartender raises an eyebrow but pours you a glass. It's whiskey. Harsh and hot, almost medicinal. You sip slowly, like you're not supposed to enjoy it, but you do. Everyone's watching, but no one says anything, not yet, because women in saloons walk a knife's edge. Respectability is fragile out here, and drinking too openly, too confidently, puts a crack in that porcelain mask, and once it cracks, it shatters. But here's the truth. The frontier was a paradox. While it was rougher, looser, and more violent than the East, it also offered some women more freedom, at least temporarily. Out here, survival mattered more than social graces. Women ran boarding houses, dry goods stores, brothels, ranches. Some of them drank publicly, and some of them owned the saloons themselves. Take Eleanor Dumont, better known as Madame Moustache, a blackjack dealer and saloon owner in California during the gold rush. She was smart, armed, and unapologetically fond of brandy. Men feared her more than they mocked her. She made money, served drinks, and lived on her own terms until, like so many, her luck ran out. She died alone, some say broke. Others say with a flask in her hand. There's another story about a woman named Kitty Leroy, a gambler, dance hall performer and 5-time bride. She once challenged a man to a shooting match while drinking straight rye. She won, and then she married him. Romance, frontier style. But for every woman like Kitty or Eleanor, there were dozens more like Mary. A ranch wife who waited weeks between mail deliveries, who churned butter, dug fence posts, buried a child or two, and, after the sun set, poured a finger of corn liquor into her chipped ceramic mug. She didn't drink to rebel. She drank because the land was hard and the silence even harder. The debates among historians get blurry here. Was the West liberating for women? Or just a different kind of cage, dusted with opportunity and still closed by expectation? Some argue the frontier loosened social norms. Others say it merely reshaped them into something even more punishing. A world where women had to be both tougher and quieter, especially when it came to drinking. You leave the saloon and walk through the town, past the blacksmith, the church, the jail. A woman steps out of the general store, bonnet tilted against the sun. In her basket are dried beans, kerosene, and, tucked between a bag of flour and a bolt of fabric, a bottle of homemade cherry cordial. Not whiskey, not cider, just strong enough to feel like something. She nods at you, you nod back, a silent pact. Some women brewed their own spirits. Especially in towns where supplies were scarce or where their husbands forbade spending money on frivolities, they called it medicine. They kept it in jars labelled with lies. One woman near Fort Laramie was rumoured to make blackberry brandy so strong it made a US Marshal weep. She said it was for female complaints. Everyone pretended to believe her. And then there were the prohibitionists. Yes, even out here. Temperance movements made it to the frontier, carried on the backs of travelling preachers and earnest women with white ribbons pinned to their bodices. The Women's Christian Temperance Union held meetings in schoolhouses and prairie churches, preaching the evils of drink. But even among their ranks, not everyone abstained. One letter, buried in the back of a Kansas diary, reads, "Refused communion wine at the meeting, but drank peach brandy with Mrs. Winslow after." Double standards, of course, that's half the story. Here's a quirky frontier fact. Some towns had ladies-only saloons. usually tiny, tucked away and far less rowdy. They sold tea, yes, but also wine and tonics. One such place in Colorado was run by 3 unmarried sisters who claimed to be therapeutic beverage specialists. People bought it. They also bought their dandelion wine, which was rumoured to have cured melancholia, joint pain and one particularly stubborn husband. You duck now into a small log cabin at the edge of town. A woman sits by the fire mending a coat. A bottle rests at her feet. She's not ashamed of it, but she also doesn't talk about it. When you ask, she shrugs. It's a hard land, makes for hard people, and hard people sometimes need soft nights. You leave as the sun sets, casting long shadows across the dirt road. A group of women walks past you, headed to the church social. They carry pies, pickles, and a jug wrapped in a cloth napkin. It's apple vinegar, they'll say, but they smile when they say it. Because out here you learn fast. Some truths aren't for the record books, they're for the night. The fire, the secret sips between prayers. And the West. The West remembers. Not in newspapers, but in footnotes and folk songs and flasks tucked into aprons. Because no matter how wide the frontier, the quiet rebellion always fits in the palm of a woman's hand. You don't hear the clinking glasses first. No, it's the rustle of silk, the rhythmic ticking of a clock on the mantel, and the unmistakable hush of genteel conversation. You've stepped into a Victorian parlour, somewhere in London, though honestly, you could be anywhere across the Atlantic too. Boston, Charleston, Edinburgh. The wallpaper curls in damp corners. The lace curtains flutter politely. And everything smells faintly of lavender, starch and quiet judgment. It's the late 1800s, and women don't drink. Well, respectable women don't drink, or at least they don't admit to drinking. But you know how this goes by now. The stricter the etiquette, the deeper the secret flask. You're in the parlour of Mrs. Augusta Farthington, middle-aged, wealthy and just rebellious enough to keep things interesting. The women have gathered for their usual Thursday book club, which, as everyone in the room knows, hasn't actually involved a book since March. They're seated with perfect posture, sipping from delicate teacups painted with violets and gold trim. But it isn't tea in those cups, not tonight. Tonight it's sherry, dry, smooth, decanted earlier from a bottle hidden behind a row of false spines labelled Plato's Dialogues. Very few guests here care about Socrates. They care about maintaining a whisper of a buzz while discussing the latest opera, or which of their husbands has taken a new secretary with unusually good penmanship. One woman, Miss Pemberley, laughs a little too loudly. Another raises her eyebrows but doesn't object. They all know the rules. Don't overdo it and always call it tonic, or cordial, or medicinal. That last one always works in a pinch. Victorian doctors prescribed alcohol for everything from fainting spells to hysteria. If a woman needed rest, brandy. If she was overworked, claret. If she had thoughts that were too sharp, laudanum with a dash of gin. Problem solved. The contradiction is so thick you could bottle it. Publicly, women are the moral centre of society, the guardians of virtue, the anchors of civilization. Privately, they're drinking under the guise of health, celebration, or female fatigue. And let's be honest, who isn't fatigued when you're wearing a corset, hosting weekly dinners, raising 5 children, and pretending not to notice your husband's evening absences? The Victorians were obsessed with appearances. Sobriety for women wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. A woman seen intoxicated was scandalised, pitied, or institutionalised depending on her social rank. And yet alcohol was omnipresent. Gin in working-class pubs, champagne in aristocratic drawing rooms, absinthe in art studios, port at funerals. You couldn't throw a lace glove without hitting a decanter. Take Queen Victoria herself. Known for mourning and moral rigidity, yes, but also fond of claret and whiskey mixed with hot water before bed. If the Queen can have a nightcap, surely Mrs. Farthington can manage a second glass of sherry without divine punishment. Now let's head across town. You step into a more modest home, where the air is thick with the stew and starch. Mrs. Dalton, a laundress, is scrubbing collars in a tub while her teenage daughter stirs a pot over the fire. On the windowsill sits a glass bottle filled with something amber. Technically, it's cough syrup, but it just so happens to burn like brandy. Mrs. Dalton's husband drinks at the local pub and leaves her with empty pockets and bruised silence. She drinks here, at the window where no one can see. She says it helps her sleep, and that's true, But it also helps her forget. The first sip softens the corners. The second builds a wall. By the third, she's floating just high enough to survive until morning. Historians debate how widespread this kind of secret drinking was among working-class Victorian women. Some argue it was rare, that social pressures kept it in check. Others point to the growing concern in medical journals and newspapers about the female drunkard. The very existence of that taste term suggests it was more than an isolated issue. In fact, the late 19th century saw a surge in so-called female inebriate asylums, places where women were sent, sometimes voluntarily, more often not, to be treated for excessive drinking. The treatment often involved cold baths, solitary confinement, and long lectures about purity and restraint. Strangely, no such facilities existed for men. Back in the parlour, the ladies have moved on to plum wine, sweet, a little syrupy, but easy to pour when the conversation turns darker. One woman's daughter has run off with a travelling violinist. Another's husband is resting in the country, which is code for either syphilis or bankruptcy. The wine softens it all, blunts the edges, makes sorrow sound poetic. Then someone pulls out a small blue bottle. You know what's coming. Laudanum, the Victorian go-to, a tincture of opium and alcohol sold over the counter and prescribed like candy. It's advertised in women's magazines, praised in etiquette books, and kept in nearly every upper and middle-class medicine cabinet. A few drops in sherry, a spoonful before bed, and if you're truly desperate, the whole bottle. There's a fringe theory, hard to prove but hard to ignore, that some Victorian women intentionally developed laudanum habits, not because they wanted to die, but because it was the only socially acceptable way to be numb. Alcohol alone was judged, but alcohol in a little bottle labelled Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, that was fine, even for children. And the books, they knew. Novels of the time are full of quietly drunk women, doting aunts with sherry breath, cousins who retire early with a headache and a flask, widows whose evening routine is less about prayer and more about port. These characters weren't just fiction, they were recognition. You walk now into a church basement where a women's temperance meeting is taking place. They're talking about morals, about saving husbands, about the wickedness of strong drink. But watch closely. One of them hesitates when asked to take the pledge. Her eyes flicker. Her hands tremble slightly. She's remembering the bottle in her sewing basket. She calls it bitters. She tells herself it's different. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Outside, the night is damp. You hear carriage wheels and the distant clink of glass. A housemaid walks by, her apron stained, a flask hidden in the folds of her skirt. She doesn't meet your eyes. Respectable women don't drink. They sip. They restore. They take the edge off. They lie. And they do it behind drawn curtains, behind cut glass decanters, behind the embroidered illusion of perfect womanhood. Because in the Victorian parlour nothing is as innocent as it looks. And everything, absolutely everything, is spiked. You step off the cobbled streets and straight into the pulse of Montmartre, Paris late 19th century, where the nights hum with chaos and creativity, and everything seems to glow just a little too brightly. The gas lamps flicker. The streets vibrate with the footfalls of poets, painters, and people who forgot what the word moderation means. You're in the belly of the Belle Epoque now, where art spills from windows and liquor from every cracked glass. You walk into the haze of a crowded cafe concert, part bar, part theatre, all trouble. The walls are yellowed with smoke, the air thick with laughter and absinthe. And above the din, someone is singing off-key to a tune no one really knows. Women are everywhere. Some are serving drinks, some are drinking them, some are the reason you're here. One in particular sits at the centre table, legs crossed, cigarette dangling, hat tilted like a wink. Her name's Delphine, though no one uses it. Most people call her the night girl. She's not famous, but she's known for her voice, for her taste in men, and for her habit of drinking absinthe like it's mineral water. You sit down across from her. She doesn't offer a greeting, just pours you a glass of that luminous green liquor, the kind that smells like licorice and poor decisions. It's not your first time, but it always feels like one. She drops in the sugar cube, lets the water drip slowly, ceremoniously, until the liquid turns cloudy and pale, like a memory you're trying to forget. And then she raises her glass. To the ghosts, she says. Absinthe was once called the Green Muse, a drink of artists, lunatics, and women who didn't want to be either, but ended up both. In this time, in this place, absinthe isn't just a drink, it's a symbol of escape, of defiance, of standing in a smoky cafe surrounded by bohemians and deciding not to be quiet. And yet the edges are sharp. Publicly, women who drank were still suspect, especially those who drank absinthe. It was seen as dangerous, unladylike, even hallucinogenic. Medical journals warned of absinthe madness, and caricatures painted female drinkers as hysterical witches or gaunt phantoms. A woman who sipped wine was flirty. A woman who drank absinthe, that was something else, something subversive. But Delphine doesn't care. She's not the only one. In the back corner, a group of women huddles around a table littered with glasses and sketches. Painters, models, seamstresses, dancers, writers. Some are half drunk, others halfway to famous. They drink cheap red wine from chipped glasses, make obscene jokes about their landlords, and talk about things no one dares put in newspapers. One woman, dressed like she wandered in from a much fancier street, drinks champagne straight from the bottle, then hiccups and recites Baudelaire. She's not slumming it, she's escaping it, because even the rich get tired of pretending. At another table, two lovers sit close, too close for the time. They pass a glass back and forth, not caring who sees. One wears trousers under her dress, the other has a bruise she covers with powder. They laugh into each other's hair and pretend the night will never end. And you realise something. Women aren't just drinking in secret anymore. Not here, not in Paris. They are drinking in public. Loudly, messily, beautifully. And the world doesn't know what to do with that. Still, there are consequences. You've heard of Suzanne Valadon, artist, muse, mother of a genius. She drank, she painted, she scandalised the art world by simply existing on her own terms. Her absinthe habits were whispered about at gallery openings, as if they were more offensive than her nudes. She was brilliant, unruly, and tired of being someone's inspiration instead of her own damn self. Or take Colette, novelist, performer, rule breaker. Her nights in Paris were filled with champagne, scandal, and women. Her writing drips with sensory overload, taste, scent, texture. She didn't just describe intoxication, she lived it. And she didn't apologise. That's the open debate still hanging over this era like a low fog. Were these women celebrated for their liberation or punished for it? Some rose, some were swallowed whole. Most did both. And then there's the fringe theory that absinthe, especially for women, was a tool of controlled rebellion. A way to engage with the masculine world of art and vice without being seen as entirely masculine themselves. It was still considered exotic, foreign, feminine, in colour. Dangerous, yes, but beautiful, the green fairy they called it, but fairies always come with sharp teeth. You step out into the night with Delphine, the streets glowing beneath gaslight halos. She laughs as she pulls you down a side alley, then stops to piss behind a barrel without shame. Men do it all the time, she says, hitching her skirts. Why shouldn't I? Why indeed. You pass a lamplighter, a priest, policeman who turns his head when he sees who you're with. No one touches her. Not because they respect her, but because they fear her. She's unpredictable, bright, slightly unhinged. All the things a woman's not supposed to be. And the absinthe, it lets her be more of all of them. Inside her apartment, a studio barely wider than your arm stretched out. She pours one last drink. The walls are covered in sketches, hers. They're rough, alive, honest. You realise she's not just the night girl, she's an artist. And her medium is herself. She drinks, sighs, and lies back on the floor. I'd be invisible without it, she says. The drink makes them look, even if they hate me for it. That sticks with you. You walk out just before dawn. Paris is soft again. The cafes are emptying, the artists asleep, the critics sharpening their pens. Somewhere a woman is still singing. And in a cafe that hasn't been cleaned in weeks, a green bottle glows in the half-light. She'll be back tonight. So will you. Because sometimes you don't need permission to pour the next drink, you just need the nerve. The air thickens again, but now it's laced with curry, coal smoke, and English arrogance. You've stepped into colonial India sometime in the late 1800s when the British Empire is flexing its sun-never-setting muscles, and everything smells faintly of entitlement and wet linen. The ceiling fans creak, the teacups clink, and under all the civility, the sweat, the forced smiles, women are drinking, both British and Indian, both with reasons, both in secret. You're at a hill station first, one of those picturesque mountain towns built by the British to escape the Indian heat and, more importantly, the Indian people. Simla, perhaps, Mussoorie, Darjeeling, take your pick. The names are different, but the rituals are always the same. It's high tea o'clock and the Mem Sahibs have gathered in a shaded veranda, seated like porcelain dolls gone slightly off colour in the sun. The table is covered in lace, the cucumber sandwiches are dry, the conversation is dull enough to make you beg for a monsoon. But hidden among the teapots and preserves are little glass bottles labelled things like rose tonic and stomach drops. They are not just digestive aids, you know better. A lady named Clara, red-faced, round-shouldered, darrelled, with a laugh just a bit too loud, taps your teacup gently and asks, "More?" The smell tells you it's not Earl Grey. It's gin, diluted, sweetened, poured from a flask hidden inside her embroidered parasol. They laugh about it like it's a game. "We mustn't overdo it," says one, as she pours herself a second cup. "My husband says women who drink look like laundresses." They all snicker, and then they drink again, because in the British colonial world, appearance is everything. Respectability is currency, but also, it's hot, it's boring, it's emotionally stifling, and women are being slowly crushed between duty, heat rash, and patriarchal rot. So they drink, quietly, politely too, with floral syrups and coded language and just enough plausible deniability. But then, you step beyond the veranda. Now you're in the zanana, the women's quarters of a wealthy Indian household. Silk cushions, rosewater basins, a soft drone of sitar music in the air. Women in vibrant saris lounge barefoot, speaking in low voices, while maids fan them lazily. A servant passes by with a silver tray of tiny glasses filled with something dark, amber and glistening. It's not tea here either. It's mahua, a traditional spirit made from the blossoms of the mahua tree, fermented by tribal communities and occasionally smuggled into noble homes when the husbands are too distracted by politics to notice. It's sweet, almost floral, with a delayed punch. One of the women giggles after her first sip, then covers her mouth in mock shock. They don't drink often, but they do drink. And like their colonial counterparts, they drink under layers. Layers of social rules, of religious expectations, of secrecy. Historians still argue about how widespread alcohol use was among Indian women during the colonial era. Official accounts are slim. British writers painted Indian women as either faintly teetotalers or depraved lower-class drunkards, nothing in between. But private letters, court records, and even temple scripts tell a different story. Some temple dancers, or devadesis, were known to drink ritual wine during ceremonies, which the British called pagan debauchery and banned outright. Others were seen drinking with clients or fellow performers. There's even a court case where a British officer accused a noblewoman of luring him into an opium den, only for her to counterclaim that he drank her family's sacred liquor and vomited into a holy basin. Neither side won, but her reputation shattered. His didn't, and that's the crux of it. Women drinking, whether British or Indian, was always framed as a moral failing, a dangerous indulgence, a sign of instability. Men drank in clubs and were praised for their camaraderie. Women drank in secret and were punished for their weakness. You move now into a smoky backroom of a bazaar, where a group of Indian women sits cross-legged around a clay pot. They're not wealthy, not educated, not part of any official world, but they know how to brew palm wine. They know when to drink it, after harvest, after funerals, after the baby's finally asleep. One of them tells you it's not about forgetting, it's about remembering what's ours. And you believe her. The colonizers see their own women's drinking as a necessary indulgence. But Indian women who drink, they are corrupted, dangerous, improper. There are pamphlets, British published, warning about the growing problem of Indian women consuming local spirits, as though alcohol were contagious and femininity too fragile to withstand it. There's a fringe theory that colonial reformers exaggerated female drinking in Indian communities to justify more moral intervention, more rules, more shame. Whether true or not, the result was the same, a rising double standard that painted every sip with suspicion. Back in Simla, Clara invites you to a ladies-only club evening. It's candlelit, hushed, and filled with whispers about servants, governors, and unfaithful husbands. On the table, fruit punch spiked with brandy, lemonade with a twist of rum, a bottle labelled for nervous conditions, actually Scotch. They toast under the guise of sisterhood, but there's a strange melancholy under the giggles, like they know they'll be scolded for this tomorrow, or worse, ignored. And yet, they keep drinking, because colonial womanhood is suffocating, and rebellion, even soft, even silly, must be poured in small glasses and shared among the brave. You leave the club late at night. The streets are quiet. Crickets chirp. Somewhere a Tonga driver snores beside his horse. A curtain flutters in an upstairs window. Behind it, the glow of a lamp and the glint of a bottleneck. Maybe it's mahua, maybe it's gin, maybe it's one of those English tonics that smells medicinal but tastes like despair. But whatever it is, someone's sipping it. Alone, or with a sister, or with a secret. Because when empires rise and fall, when flags change and languages shift, some things remain. Women drinking in the dark, in defiance, with their dignity wrapped in silken silence. You barely get through the door before the sound hits you, trumpets wailing, piano keys hammering like a fistfight in Shida, and voices laughing too loud for church. Welcome to the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, the Jazz Age. Call it whatever you like, just know this. Everything is moving fast, including the women and including the gin. You're in Chicago tonight, or maybe Harlem or New Orleans or San Francisco, it doesn't really matter. Every city has a corner where the lights burn too bright and the rules bend until they snap. Outside, prohibition has turned the law against alcohol. Inside, no one cares. In fact, the illegal is half the fun. And look, there they are. Flappers. Not just in magazines, not just in Gatsby's ballroom, but right here. Dancing with their shoes off and their cigarettes dangling, lipstick smeared and laughing like they invented air. You catch the eye of one as she steps toward the bar. She's flushed, glittering with sweat, her bobbed hair sticking to her forehead like a crown of rebellion. She shouts to the bartender, 2 gin rickeys, make 'em strong. He nods, she winks, and then she grabs your arm and says, come on, we're not getting any younger, and this gin's not getting any colder. You follow her into the thick of it. The room is dense with bodies, jazz, and they see the perfume of women who have absolutely stopped caring what anyone thinks. They drink fast, they drink hard, and they drink publicly. That's the shock of it, really. Not the drinking, but the audacity. Because for centuries, women better drank in whispers and shadows. Now they're doing it in dance halls, in bars, in speakeasies that hide behind soda fountains and fake bookstores. They're lighting their own smokes and ordering cocktails by name. They're elbowing into the male world of nightlife and saying, make room. And men, some cheer, some leer, some panic. Because this isn't just about alcohol. It's about women doing what they're not supposed to do, in a time when everyone is pretending they're finally free. The 19th Amendment passed in 1920. Women can vote, women can work, and now women can drink, at least if they know the right door to knock on. But not all women get to knock. White flappers with jazz records and trust funds can get away with a lot more than black women, immigrant women, working class women. For every Clara Bow in a feathered headband dancing on a bar, there's a seamstress sneaking a flask into her apron and praying no one sees. The revolution isn't exactly equal, still it's loud. Take the speakeasy you're in right now. The bartender is a woman. Her name's Louise, and she wears trousers, swears like a dock worker, and knows more about bourbon than anyone alive. She mixes your drink with a practiced snap of the wrist, slaps a cherry on top, and says, tell the cops it's cough syrup. She laughs, you laugh. The police? They're all not laughing. Outside, the law is hunting women like Louise, not just because they're selling booze, but because they represent everything the temperance movement warned about. Independence, visibility, control. The Women's Christian Temperance Union is still out there, clutching its pearls and pamphlets, furious that women have stepped out of the parlour and into the saloon. And yet, here they are. Some are just here for fun. Others are here because they're tired. Of war, of grief, of men telling them what's proper. Remember, World War I just ended. Millions of men dead. Millions of women left behind to work, survive, rebuild, and now, in the aftermath, they've tasted freedom. The idea that they can drink like men? It's not just thrilling, it's fair. But it's dangerous too. A woman caught drunk in public still risks everything. A lost job, a ruined reputation, a family scandal. The newspapers love it. Modern girls drunk at dance. Flapper spotted stumbling from speakeasy. Headlines slap like cold water. And under everyone is the message. This is what happens when you let women out of the house. Still the women come out. In the Harlem Renaissance, they come out in glittering gowns, reciting poetry, performing in smoky clubs, drinking bootleg gin with their heads held high. Women like Josephine Baker, Freddie Washington, and Bessie Smith, all performers who drank, laughed, lived. and dared to exist in full colour while the world begged them to be quiet. There's a fringe theory that women's alcohol consumption during Prohibition actually increased, not because of rebellion, but because of accessibility. Before, bars were for men. After Prohibition, everything moved underground, and suddenly the lines blurred. Women could enter spaces previously denied to them, and once they were in, they weren't leaving. Of course, the drinks weren't always safe. Bathtub gin, wood alcohol, homemade moonshine with more risk than flavour. One flapper tells you about her friend who went blind after a bad bottle. But the party was worth it, she says, tossing back a slug of something that tastes like regret and juniper. You should have seen the dress I was wearing. Even in this newfound chaos, though, the old judgment lingers. You step into a beauty parlour the next morning. Hungover women sip tomato juice and whisper about last night. One says her mother found her flask. Another worries her photo might end up in the paper. A third shrugs and says, "What's the point of being modern if you still have to be scared?" Good question. Historians are still arguing about it. Was the flapper era a real feminist awakening? Or just another brief indulgence allowed by the system before it snapped back? Did women really drink more? Or did they just do it more visibly? Either way, something broke open here. You leave the speakeasy just before sunrise. The streets are quiet again, littered with feathers and dreams and someone's left shoe. A woman in heels walks past you, holding her purse like a trophy, and humming a jazz tune under her breath. Her lipstick is smeared. Her eyes are bright. She doesn't say a word, but you can tell she's thinking it. She drank, she danced, she didn't ask permission, and she's not sorry. The air is hot and stale inside, thick with perfume, tobacco, and a little something extra, the sharp metallic tang of risk. You're in the United States, deep in the Prohibition years, but this time the speakeasy is quieter, tucked into a basement beneath a tailor's shop. The lights are low, the jazz is softer, and the women here aren't dancing. They're watching, listening, strategizing. This is not a flapper's night out, it's a meeting place for women who know that drinking isn't just pleasure anymore. It's performance, it's politics, and most of all, it's camouflage. Welcome to the underworld behind the underworld. Here, women drink not just to rebel, but to lie their way through the lie. Prohibition, that great national gaslighting project, is in full swing. Officially, alcohol is illegal. Unofficially, it's everywhere and everyone knows it. Especially women. Especially the ones smart enough to survive by stepping sideways through the cracks. You take a seat next to a woman named Rose. Mid-30s, sharp chin, lips stained with bootleg burgundy. She sells shoes by day. By night she moves gin for someone she won't name. She sips like someone who has nothing to prove but everything to hide. Her nails are clean, her flask is engraved, and her smile is the kind you only learn after surviving something you don't talk about. She leans toward you. You need to look respectable. That's the trick. Look like a church secretary, drink like a bootlegger. Across the room, two women in fur collars are whispering over highballs served in chipped china cups. They're not drinking because they like gin. They're drinking because they know how to use it. One of them slips a folded note into the other's coat pocket as she stands to leave. Her glass is still half full. She never touched it. That's the game now, because with the rise of Prohibition came a new kind of woman drinker, one who learned to play both sides. She had to. Bars were illegal, but socialising wasn't. Liquor was banned, but flasks were stitched into garters and purses. Men faced fines, women faced character assassination, so they adapted. Some married into the game, others ran it. There's the story of Texas Guinan, saloon queen, actress, and full-time tornado. She opened speakeasies all over New York, greeted guests with a throaty, "Hello, suckers!" and knew exactly how far to push before the law came knocking. Arrested multiple times, convicted never. Her crime really was visibility. Then there's Hattie Burleson, who ran a covert bar in her San Antonio home, churchgoer by day, moonshine maven by night. She was arrested and fined, sure, but she never stopped. People said she once served whiskey to the sheriff out of a teacup with Bible verses printed on it. And of course there were the mules. Women used to smuggle booze in corsets, in baby carriages, in coffins. One woman, nicknamed Mother M. Hawahain, reportedly carried pint bottles in her chignon, her perfectly coiled hair bun. Who's going to frisk a lady's updo? Nobody with manners, that's who. Even as enforcement ramped up, the assumption that women were innocent worked to their advantage. Police rarely searched women thoroughly. Raids focused on men, and the image of the pure, temperate woman. That was the shield behind which half the liquor in the country flowed. But it cut both ways. The same social protections that let women smuggle and scheme also turned them into scapegoats. If a woman was caught drunk in public, the judgment was swift and vicious. Headlines didn't just say she broke the law, they said she broke femininity itself. A drunken man was a criminal, a drunken woman was a tragedy, and the temperance movement loved that narrative. You visit a meeting of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, a tightly corseted room full of pamphlets, frowns, and furious knitting. They speak in tones of moral urgency, warning that women drinkers threaten not just the home, but the soul of the nation. They tell stories of mothers who abandoned their children for gin, of young women lured into jazz clubs and out of virtue. They don't mention the men who left bruises and empty pantries behind, only the women who forgot themselves. You leave the meeting and return to the city, where no one has ever forgotten themselves. They just learned how to hide better. Here's the historical fact, During Prohibition, women's alcohol consumption did increase, especially in the urban areas. The underground nature of drinking actually made spaces more accessible. There were no longer men-only bars when everything was illegal and ad hoc. In speakeasies, women weren't just allowed, they were part of the business plan. They brought elegance, distraction, and deniability, but it came with risk. A woman named Evelyn was arrested in 1928 for drinking in a speakeasy. She was 22, worked in a department store, and had one drink. Her photo made the paper. Her boss fired her. Her fiancé left her. Her landlady refused to let her return. No trial, no appeal, just the weight of a world ready to collapse on a woman for sipping what her brother was already selling in crates. And the quirky detail? Some enterprising flapper fashion lines included prohibition pockets in skirts, small hidden compartments designed to hold a hip flask or a small bottle. They called them boudoir flasks, as if naming it something dainty would distract from what it really was, survival gear. The scholarly debate around this era swirls like smoke in a hidden room. Some argue that women's visibility in speakeasies was performative, that they were still being used as decoration, bait for male spending. Others say this was a genuine moment of female agency, women drinking publicly, loudly and legally, well, illegally but socially legitimized, and claiming space in ways they never had before. The truth, as usual, is both. You step out into the alley behind the speakeasy. Rain taps against the bricks. A woman lights a cigarette, her hat pulled low, her lips curled in a smile that doesn't need you to approve. She takes a sip from her flask, nods once, and disappears into the dark. Tomorrow she'll be someone's secretary, someone's sister, someone's perfectly polite neighbour. But tonight she drank, she lied, she toasted the truth even if she couldn't say it out loud. And the lie? It tasted like freedom. You can feel the shift before you even open the door. The energy is different, tighter but full of motion. You're in the 1940s now, smack in the middle of a world at war. The lights are dimmed, the windows are taped, and the air hums with the low, constant tension of ration books, air raid sirens and telegrams no one wants to receive. But inside this factory break room, under the buzz of fluorescent lights and the clang of distant machinery, there's a bottle wrapped in brown paper sitting casually on the table. Welcome to wartime womanhood. You're in Detroit tonight, could be Pittsburgh or Sheffield, or anywhere that's churning out weapons, planes and miracles under impossible deadlines. Rosie the Riveter is on the posters, rolling up her sleeves, flashing a bicep and a smile that's trying very hard to look natural. But real women like Rosie, they're here. Grease under their nails, burns on their arms, exhaustion deep in their bones. And after the double shift, they drink. Not at bars, not usually. Those are still male spaces, still thick with smoke and testosterone and a sense that any woman inside better be buying more than beer. No, women drink where they can, on back steps, in shared rooms, on cots surrounded by other women who understand. It's often cheap. It's often bad. But it's theirs. You sit down next to a woman named Lorna. Her overalls are stained with oil. Her lipstick is smudged, but defiant. She pulls the bottle out from under the table and pours a splash into a chipped enamel mug. She grins. "Victory whiskey," she says. "Tastes like rust and regret." She offers it to you. It does. During the war, women enter the workforce in numbers never seen before. They take over jobs left behind by men, factory work, transport, munitions, even running entire households alone. They ration, they stretch, they endure, and with that responsibility comes a quiet surge in alcohol consumption. Not the kind that ends in brawls and bar brawls. The kind that creeps in on Friday nights, when the kids are asleep and the bombers haven't flown overhead yet. Some of them say it's just to sleep, others say it's to forget. Most don't say anything at all. But let's be clear, not all wartime drinking is about sorrow. In some corners of the world, it's about celebration. In London, the pubs stay open even during the Blitz. Women crowd in with their gas masks slung over one shoulder and their hair curled tight. They drink brown ale and gin and rationed vermouth. They toast survival. They flirt with soldiers. They laugh too loudly because the laughter has to last through the night. One woman, Audrey, tells you she kissed a stranger every time a bomb hit within a mile. It was that or cry, she shrugs. In Paris, women drink with resistance fighters in basement cafes. In Moscow, they pass vodka hand to hand between sandbag doorways. In the Pacific Islands, army nurses sip rum from canteens when the men aren't looking. It's happening everywhere, quietly, boldly, desperately. And then the war ends. The boys come home, the factories close, the posters vanish, and the women who held everything together are expected to smile, slide back into aprons, and pretend they didn't like the taste of whiskey on their own terms. You find Lorna again 6 months later. The factory is shuttered. She's working part-time as a secretary. Her overalls are gone, replaced by a dress she hates. She pours herself a drink in a crystal glass this time. Gin, slightly more civilized, but her face still crumples at the taste. She doesn't toast. She just drinks, and this time it feels different. Because now it's not about victory, it's about memory. About slipping into something that used to feel like power and now tastes like a reminder. Women had jobs, money, autonomy, and then they were told, "Thanks, we'll take it from here." The alcohol stayed. The scholarly debates kick in here. Some argue that wartime was the great unshackling moment for women, that once they worked and drank and lived like men, they couldn't go back. Others say it was temporary, that women were dragged back into domesticity with a vacuum cleaner and a smile. The truth? A tangle, as always. Here's the historical fact. Female alcohol consumption did rise during World War II, particularly among women in urban areas and those engaged in factory or war-related work. Rationing made it harder to come by, but not impossible. And when the war ended, women didn't suddenly stop drinking. They just got better at hiding it again. And the quirky footnote? American distillers during the war had to convert their factories to make industrial alcohol for the war effort, used in everything from explosives to antifreeze. One brand of rye whiskey was nicknamed Victory Fuel. It burned going down. But people drank it anyway. Back in the suburbs, things are shifting again. You're in a backyard now, a barbecue, children shrieking over sprinklers, a row of women under an awning sipping punch from pastel cups. It's fruit juice, sure, but everyone knows what's floating in there. There's a tension in their laughter. They're learning how to drink like nothing's wrong. Like they didn't give up something vital in exchange for post-war peace. Lorna's there, older now, still smudging her lipstick, still pouring just a splash into her lemonade when no one's looking. She sees you watching and winks. For the nerves, she says, and the neighbours. Because drinking now isn't just relief, it's ritual. A way to soften the return to normalcy that never quite fits right. A quiet way to say, I remember who I was when the world was on fire. And I liked her. You leave the barbecue at dusk. The street is lined with houses that all look the same. Inside each one, a woman who smiled too hard today lifts a glass and takes a breath she's not allowed to call exhaustion. She drinks, and in that sip, she claims something. Not loudly, not legally, but enough. You hear it before you see it. Ice clinking in a highball glass, the sharp hiss of a soda siphon, the faint warble of a radio playing something soft and forgettable. You've stepped into the 1950s now, squarely into the pastel-coloured battlefield of the American domestic dream. This is the Cold War era, and everything is about appearances. The lawn must be manicured, the meatloaf must not be dry, and the wife? She must smile. Always. Especially when she's pouring the drinks. You're in the kitchen now, that mythical 1950s kitchen. Blinding white appliances. Chrome accents and cabinets full of jello moulds and shame. A woman stands at the counter. Her name is Judy. She wears pearls, heels and lipstick to match her linoleum. She also keeps a bottle of vodka in the laundry basket and a flask in the freezer labelled chicken stock. She's not an anomaly, she's a prototype. Because in the polished world of post-war America, drinking becomes part of the script, especially in the suburbs. Cocktails of the new conversation, martinis before dinner, highballs with the neighbours, a scotch for the men, a whiskey sour for the ladies. And Judy? She's the hostess, the mixologist, the bartender in a crinoline skirt. Every Friday night her house fills with people, couples in matching outfits, hair slicked, voices low, secrets quieter. They drink with elegance, with restraint, with curated recipes clipped from magazines like Ladies and Home Journal and Better Homes and Gardens. But behind all that style there's a slow undercurrent of desperation. These women aren't drinking to celebrate, they're drinking to stay upright. The 50s sold a lie so polished it gleamed. The nuclear family, the obedient wife, the happy homemaker. But underneath that facade, millions of women were drowning in boredom, loneliness, and the quiet terror of having every need met, except the need to be themselves. And alcohol? Alcohol was the one indulgence that came wrapped in social permission. Judy tells you she never drank before marriage. Now, it's a ritual. One martini while cooking dinner. Another after the kids go to bed. Sometimes 3, sometimes more. I'm just keeping my hands busy, she says, swirling the glass. Her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. You notice something else. She never pours just for herself. She always makes 2. One for her, one for the illusion that everything's fine. This isn't the loud rebellion of the flapper or the war worker. This is a quiet war, fought with mixers and monogrammed napkins, with recipes that say add 1 ounce vodka, stir vigorously, and try not to scream. Even outside the home, women are drinking more. Secretaries stash bottles in their desks, tucked behind typewriter ribbons and paperclip tins. Department stores sell perfume bottles that double as flasks. And that PTA meeting is not just about bake sales. Half the committee is lit before the minutes are even read. But no one talks about it, not out loud, because even though drinking is expected, it has to be done correctly. A lady's drink, something pink, something citrus, something that masks the bite of what's really going on. And if she drinks too much, then it's a moral failing, a personal collapse, not a symptom of the impossible role she's been forced into. One neighbour whispers to Judy that Beverly down the street was seen wobbling on her heels at the supermarket. Another says, I heard she spiked her coffee at the church social. They laugh, but the judgment is there. Women must drink gracefully or not at all. And when they can't, that's when the whispers become action. By the late 1950s, housewife alcoholism becomes a quietly acknowledged problem. Doctors, mostly male, prescribe tranquilizers to women complaining of nerves and fatigue. And still, women drink. Because the pills don't stop the loneliness, they just fog it. There's a fringe theory that the explosion of cocktail culture during this time wasn't about indulgence, it was about control. That women clung to their bar carts not to escape, but to manage, to measure, to own something in a life where nearly everything was dictated for them. And then there's the historical footnote. The average woman in 1955 consumed more hard liquor than any generation of American women before her. Quietly, elegantly, often alone, you leave Judy's house and walk down the street. Identical lawns, identical mailboxes. Behind every picture window, a woman whose smile, too long today, is topping off her gin and tonic with hands that tremble just slightly. In one home, a woman hides a bottle of bourbon in her sewing kit. In another, it's under the sink, labelled floor polish. One keeps a flask tucked in the folds of a Reader's Digest. Another only drinks after dark when the kids are asleep and the silence is unbearable. And it's not just America. In Britain, Australia, Canada, anywhere the suburban ideal has taken hold, women are quietly pouring their second glass. They toast with friends and cry in bathrooms. They drink because they don't know what else to do. They drink because being grateful isn't the same as being happy. And still, no one talks about it. You step into Judy's kitchen one more time. She's making deviled eggs for a bridge night she doesn't want to host. The bottle is out. The smile is on. She looks at you and says, "Do you think it's wrong to drink alone if you prefer it?" She doesn't wait for an answer. Because deep down, she knows. And deep down, she doesn't ought to care. She lifts her glass. "To peace and quiet," she says, and drinks to the only silence she can control. The world softens now, not with lace or lullabies, but with a low thrum of music, vinyl spinning under the needle, the bass line of rebellion creeping in from somewhere off stage. You're in the 1960s. The air smells like patchouli, Aquanet, and just a hint of new money perfume. It's the era of cultural earthquakes, civil rights marches, rock concerts, Cold War dread, and yet the liquor cabinet remains as stocked as ever. Only now something's shifted. Women are still drinking, but they are drinking differently, and for the first time in a long time someone is watching them do it. You're in a smoky lounge, somewhere just outside New York, or maybe inside Los Angeles. Wherever the couches are low, the drinks are tall, and the conversation has started to shift from recipes to revolution. A woman in a tight sheath dress and teased hair sits at the bar with a Tom Collins in hand. She's alone, not waiting for a man, not even pretending. She orders another and opens a book. Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique. The bartender squints at the cover. She doesn't flinch. Her name's Claire. She's 36, divorced, and just got her own apartment. It has shag carpet and an ashtray in every room. She's not trying to be a symbol. She just wants to drink her drink without pretending it's medicine, or dessert, or an accident. And that's what the 1960s begin to offer. The appearance of choice. Women are stepping out, literally, into careers, politics, college, classrooms, into bars, into magazine ads, and with them, brands start to follow. Suddenly, women aren't just buying the alcohol, they're targeted by it. Claire flicks through a glossy magazine while she sips. There's a full-page ad with a woman in cat-eye eyeliner holding a martini glass like it's a torch. She knows what she wants, the caption says. And for once, it's not just pearls and pot roast. It's gin, or bourbon, or whatever she damn well pleases. This is when her drink begins to emerge. Not the one handed to her, not the one poured in a dainty floral cup, but something tailored, marketed, and, of course, manipulated. Vodka explodes in popularity during this time, largely because it's clear, odourless, and mixes easily with fruit juice. For women, it's sold as elegant, modern, light, feminine. It's also stronger than most people realise, but no one mentions that. Just like no one mentions that a lot of those new low-calorie cocktails are designed to keep women buzzed, but thin. Can't have a martini belly ruining the miniskirt revolution. Meanwhile, back at the bar, Claire is finishing her drink as a man slides into the seat beside her. He doesn't ask. He assumes that she's available, that she's waiting, that the drink is an invitation. She stares at him and says without blinking, "You're standing in the way of my book." He laughs awkwardly, leaves. She orders another. Out in the suburbs, drinking is evolving too. The cocktail party becomes less about community and more about performance. Adults playing dress-up, sipping sidecars and gin fizzes, while pretending not to notice whose marriage is slowly unravelling under the hors d'oeuvres tray. And women? They are doing a new kind of tightrope walk. Be glamorous, be available, be composed, but don't need the drink, don't let it show. Unless you're at a girls' night. You're invited to one now. Claire's friend Diane hosts it in her split-level ranch, all avocado appliances and shag carpet. There are cheese cubes, cigarette holders, and an ashtray shaped like a cat. The women drink wine out of tall-stemmed glasses and trade gossip in low voices. But underneath it, there's something electric. They talk about birth control, about their mothers, about how their husbands snore like freight trains. One pours another glass and says, "He asked if I was getting too fond of the bottle. I said, not fond enough." Everyone laughs a little too hard. This is also the decade where women begin to appear more visibly in the workplace, and with that comes workplace drinking. Office parties, happy hours, little bottles tucked in desk drawers. Secretaries sip discreetly from coffee mug. Some drink to fit in with male colleagues. Some drink to forget they're still expected to type 70 words a minute and get the boss's dry cleaning. And of course, not everyone is white middle class and sipping wine under a tracklit ceiling. In Harlem, in Watts, in Oakland, women are organising, marching, surviving. They're not attending cocktail parties. They're working 2 jobs and raising 4 kids. Their drinking, if it happens, is hidden even deeper. The judgment's heavier. The stakes higher. An intoxicated white housewife is troubled. An intoxicated black woman? Dangerous. Disposable. That's the open debate among scholars. Was the 60s an era of liberation or another rebranding of the same cage? Women were drinking more publicly, yes, but were they freer? Or just performing a new kind of modern femininity, now with olives and vermouth? Then there's the fringe fact. In 1967, a woman named Ruth Eiserman Scheer became the first woman on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. One of the most circulated photos of her showed her holding a drink, smiling. The media called her twisted, wild, unhinged. Her drink was cited as evidence of her moral unravelling, as if whiskey could turn you into a criminal. Claire's at home now. She's kicked off her heels, unzipped her dress, turned the music down low. She pours herself one last drink, not out of rebellion, not out of depression, but because it's hers. She opens her diary not to confess but to record. She writes, "Today I told a man I didn't care what he thought. I lit a cigarette in front of my boss. I bought my own damn scotch." She underlines it twice. You leave her in that quiet moment of ownership, glass in hand, hair unbrushed, laughter still caught somewhere in her throat. Because this decade doesn't end with a bang, it ends with a whisper. And it tastes like gin. You walk through a velvet rope into flashing lights and mirror balls, and immediately the world starts pulsing to a baseline you can feel in your teeth. It's the late 70s, and everything is shiny. Disco has taken over the night, polyester is breathing its last synthetic gasp, and you're deep inside Studio 54, or at least somewhere trying very hard to be. New York, Miami, LA doesn't matter. It's all lights, lashes, and libation. Welcome to the decade where indulgence isn't just accepted, it's mandatory, and the women? Oh, the women are holding their drinks high and their heads higher. You spot her immediately. Silver jumpsuit, teased hair like an architectural miracle. Heels so high they seem like an act of defiance. She's at the bar ordering champagne, not because she loves it, but because it looks good with the lighting. Her name is Tasha, and she doesn't wait for anyone. She taps her nails on the counter, flashes a grin at the bartender, and doesn't say thank you. Power is implied. Tonight, she'll drink 3 flutes of bubbly, 1 vodka cranberry for the vitamins, and a flaming shot called a disco inferno that tastes like something between regret and lighter fluid. And no one will tell her she shouldn't. Because by now, women drinking in public isn't scandalous. It's fashionable. There's no need to hide it behind teacups or call it nerves. Alcohol is sold to women openly, loudly, and with glitter. The beverage industry has caught on. Advertisements feature sultry women sipping cocktails alone, dressed like Bond girls and looking bored. Brands are beginning to whisper in your ear, "You deserve this." And women believe it. After all, this is post-sexual revolution, post-women's liberation, post-Vietnam, post-Watergate. The culture is jaded, cynical, and soaked in body oil and denial. The boundaries are looser now. Women have more access to money, nightlife, and decision-making. They can get a drink without a man's approval or his paycheck. They go to clubs with other women. They buy their own rounds. They know the difference between vodka and gin. This isn't their first time. Tasha pulls you into the dance floor now. The lights spin, her drink sloshes, and she dances like no one's judging her. Because for the moment, no one is. In this smoky, glitter-drenched cave of noise, she's allowed to be whatever she wants. Sexy, sloppy, powerful, bored. Tomorrow she might cry in her car outside a job interview. But tonight, she's titanium, but not every woman drinks like Tasha. You slip out of the club and into a high-rise office late at night. A woman in her early 40s, blazer off, shoes off, sits at her desk, feet up, scotch in hand. Her name is Marion. She's a VP in a firm where no one else looks like her. She doesn't drink to celebrate, she drinks to recalibrate. Every single day is a game of chess where she's always black and always going second. She drinks to remember who she is. This decade marks the rise of the career woman, and she comes with her own cocktail. Stronger, cleaner, no frills. The Cosmo won't hit until the 90s. Right now, it's all about martinis, gin and tonics, scotch. Drinks that don't waste time. Marion has 2 before her taxi. Maybe 3 if the meeting was brutal. In the suburbs, women drink too, though less glamorously. There's wine at Tupperware parties, rum punch at backyard barbecues, and a stiff screwdriver after the kids finally shut up. Magazines now sell drink recipes alongside diet advice, sometimes on the same page. Have a daiquiri, but make it skinny. Enjoy your white wine, but only 1 glass. Women are allowed to drink, but still expected to do it within narrow lines. Be fun, be light, be sexy, but never out of control. Unless you're famous. Because this is also the age of the female celebrity digitally lush. Think Elizabeth Taylor swanning through interviews with a goblet of something unidentifiable and unapologetic. Think Bette Davis, slurring insults with a cigarette in one hand and a martini in the other. They are icons. They are warnings. They They are glamorized and demonized in the same breath. And for every famous drinker, there are 100 anonymous ones slipping into rehab clinics or checking into rest homes under fake names. The stigma of female alcoholism hasn't disappeared. It's just become more cleverly disguised. Here's your quirky footnote. The first light beer targeted directly at women came out in the late 70s, with the ad campaign promising that it had fewer calories but all the taste. It flopped. Why? Because even though women were drinking more, they didn't want to be pandered to, they wanted the real stuff, or at least the right to choose it without being talked down to by a cartoon calorie chart. And here's the historical debate. Was this era the golden age of female drinking freedom, or just the next phase of selling intoxication as empowerment? Some scholars say the disco era let women finally own their pleasure. Others argue it commodified that pleasure so it could be sold back to them with a designer label and a hangover. Back at the club, Tasha's drink is gone. She's got lip gloss on her teeth and a hole in her tights. She doesn't care, someone offers her another shot, she takes it. Why not? This is her night. Her story. Her mess. But outside, Marion gets in a cab alone, pulling her coat tight. She doesn't speak. She's done performing. She's done smiling. She's done proving. And somewhere in a small apartment in Kansas, a woman pours boxed wine into a Garfield mug and watches the Mary Tyler Moore Show on rerun. She drinks slowly, trying not to spill on the new carpet. Every woman is drinking her way through something. Because in the 1970s, liberation comes in sips and stumbles, in kisses and regrets, in toasts and hangovers. Some drink to forget, some drink to remember, and some, like Tasha, drink because the music is just too good not to. You step into the 1980s like you're stepping into a music video, neon everywhere, hair defying gravity, and shoulder pads sharp enough to double as weapons. The world is louder now, faster, drenched in ambition and hairspray. Wall Street is booming, malls are sprawling, and self-actualization has officially become an aesthetic. And right there in the middle of it all, clicking her heels across a marble lobby with a cocktail in hand, is the woman of the moment. Her name might be Linda, or Diane, or something just aspirational enough to be featured in a Revlon ad. She's wearing power red, matching lipstick, and carries herself like someone who's memorized every line from Working Girl and made it her religion. She's not sipping daintily, she's drinking. Cosmopolitans, Chardonnay, straight gin, whatever matches her briefcase. She's not just allowed to drink now, she's expected to, because drinking has become shorthand for status, confidence, sophistication. If you're a woman in the boardroom, you better know how to make small talk over a whiskey sour and hold your liquor as tightly as you hold your resume. The bar has replaced the water cooler. Deals are being made over dirty martinis. Promotions are toasted with champagne flutes that no one actually likes but everyone accepts. And for women climbing the corporate ladder, drinking is part of the uniform, along with pantyhose and thinly veiled exhaustion. You meet Linda at a bar just off Madison Avenue. It's dim, expensive, and smells like cologne and competition. She orders a vodka tonic with lime and talks to you about the latest ad campaign she's leading. She mentions her husband once, briefly, then moves on to her car lease and how she keeps a bottle of Dewar's in her desk drawer for emergencies and Wednesdays. She laughs, but not really, because underneath all the glam and gloss, the 80s are hard. The pressure is everywhere. Women are breaking glass ceilings, yes, but also cleaning up the shards. They're expected to work like men, look like models, mother like saints, and never show a crack in the facade. So they drink. After work, on weekends, in taxis, in kitchens with spotless granite countertops and stacks of unread self-help books. The phrase wine mum hasn't been coined yet, but she's already here, clad in leg warmers, heating up lean cuisine, and topping off a glass of Chardonnay she swears is her last one. And then there's the club scene. If the corporate women are drinking to endure, the nightlife women are drinking to forget. You find yourself in a velvet-roped disco-turned-underground bar somewhere between New York's excess and LA's neon glow. There's coke in the bathrooms, synth pop on the speakers, and drinks that come with names like Sex on the Beach and Zombie. Women here are drinking loud, glitter-streaked, shoulder-shimmying unbothered. They're dancing with each other, laughing at men refusing to be cute about anything. One of them, in a sequined tube top, shouts above the music, "I want to die drunk and fabulous!" She throws her head back and swigs from a bottle of champagne. You're not sure if she's joking. At the same time, the wellness culture is bubbling up just beneath the lip gloss, aerobics videos, Jane Fonda, low-fat everything. Women are being told to drink but also to detox, to celebrate but also to control. It's a decade that tells women they can have it all, as long as they stay skinny, sober-adjacent and perfect under pressure. That contradiction starts to boil, and eventually it spills over. By the mid-80s, media starts to sound the alarm. Are women drinking too much? The hidden female alcoholic. When the martini glass comes home with you, TV movies show trembling hands and crying children. One famous actress goes public with her addiction and is praised for her bravery, while a less famous secretary loses her job after showing up hungover. The double standard is alive and limping. Here's a historical fact for you. Between 1977 and 1983, female alcohol-related hospitalizations doubled in the US. Doctors start to recognize that women metabolize alcohol differently, that the same amount hits harder, faster, but the public message is less scientific and more moralistic. Ladies, don't overdo it. You don't want to be that girl. And yet, advertising doesn't slow down. White wine becomes the drink of suburban prestige. Bartles and James and wine coolers sweep the market, designed to be fruity, approachable, and non-threatening. Have one with dinner, the ads say. You deserve it. Wine is now a lifestyle, an accessory to the microwave, the minivan, and the self-neglect. Meanwhile, somewhere in the middle of Ohio, a woman sits at her kitchen table, feet aching, hair teased, lipstick worn off hours ago. She pours herself a glass of rhyonite from a box that brags about freshness. Her kids are watching Knight Rider in the other room. Her husband is out bowling. She drinks half the glass in one sip and doesn't blink. She doesn't feel like Linda, or the sequined dancer, or the aerobics instructor. She feels invisible. The open scholarly debate around this decade centres on that contradiction. Were women drinking more out of celebration or suffocation? Was alcohol a tool of empowerment or the sugar-rimmed symptom of burnout? One school of thought says the 80s were a golden age of female independence. Another says they were a Trojan horse filled with anxiety and cheap wine. And the fringe detail? In 1987, when a perfume called Brute for Women was launched, infused with notes of musk and, no kidding, bourbon, it failed. But for a moment, the line between fragrance and drink blurred like everything else in this decade. Back at the bar, Linda orders one last drink. She looks at her watch. I have a meeting at 8 a.m, she says. But screw it. That's future me's problem. She raises her glass. Her lipstick is still perfect. And somewhere across the country in a quieter house, a woman lifts her own glass. Just as alone, just as tired, just as much in need of something she can't name. Because in the 1980s, women aren't just drinking for fun. They're drinking to hold the line, to prove they belong in the office, in the nightclub, in the world, and sometimes to forget how exhausting it is to do all three at once. Now the lights dim a little, but the glow doesn't fade. It changes hue. You step into the 90s, and everything suddenly feels softer, looser, like the shoulder pads finally relaxed and started listening to Alanis Morissette. Gone are the disco balls and corporate claws of the 80s. Now it's all coffee shops, earth tones, and people pretending they're chill while simmering with unresolved trauma. And women? Still drinking, but now they're calling it unwinding. You walk into a mid-sized city bar on a Friday night. It's somewhere between a pub and a cafe, brick walls, votive candles, and a chalkboard menu listing drinks with names like Melancholy Mule and Cosmolite. The soundtrack is a loop of Tori Amos, Seal and Fiona Apple, and the bartender has a nose ring and a minor in philosophy. You take a seat and look around. That's where you spot her, Rachel, or Sarah, or maybe Jen. She's in her late 20s, works in publishing or something adjacent to it, and she's just ordered her third vodka cranberry without bothering to flirt for it. Her hair is twisted into a claw clip, her Doc Martens scuffed, and her laugh is dry. She tells the bartender she's just done with men this week. Then she drinks, slowly but purposefully. You're in the age of single and thriving, or at least single and trying. This is the decade that promises women a new kind of independence, not the shoulder pad power of the corporate 80s, but something more emotionally aware, more choice-oriented. You don't have to get married. You don't have to have kids. You can just be. And part of that being often includes drinking, this time more out in the open, with fewer apologies and far more sugar. Enter the cosmopolitan, bright pink, tart, and impossible to separate from Sex and the City, which hijacks the cocktail and makes it a symbol, a toast, a wink, a declaration. Women drinking together isn't just social, it's the whole damn point. 4 women in New York talking about sex, careers, disappointments, bad dates. And doing it all with a martini glass in hand. It's aspirational, it's absurd, and it hits something raw. Because that show, and that drink, let women be messy in public, and celebrated for it. Back in the bar, Rachel to maybe Jen pulls out her flip phone and texts her roommate. Here for one more, then done, I swear. She's lying. She knows it, but it's a lie that tastes like freedom. She talks to you about her job, her last situationship, and how she has to be up early tomorrow, but screw it. Sound familiar? The decade is split between women who are promised it all and women who realise that promise comes with strings. The message is, be independent, but not cold. Be sexy, but not slutty. Drink, but not like a man. And don't even think about needing it. And yet needing it happens, especially in kitchens after long days. Especially for mothers still figuring out their place between June Cleaver and Roseanne. Especially for women in quiet apartments, waiting for dial-up to connect and wondering if the guy from work likes them or is just polite. Wine coolers make a comeback, but now they come in clear bottles and are rebranded for the modern woman. Zima becomes a cultural joke, but not before it's served at 1,000 women's nights. The rise of alco-pops, sweet, low-alcohol drinks with bright colours and zero shame, takes off. Drinking is back in fashion, but this time it's playful, feminine, fun. Well, that's the marketing. The reality is a little heavier. Here's your historical fact. Alcohol use among women in the 1990s rose steadily, especially among women aged 25 to 44. It was dismissed at the time, painted as harmless, social, a side effect of liberation. But in hindsight, patterns emerge. Quiet dependencies, normalised overdrinking. The glass of wine after work turning into the bottle. The brunch mimosa stretching into an afternoon fog. And while the world starts whispering about male addiction in rock bands and baseball dugouts, female addiction still hides behind the kitchen counter and the coffee table. This is also the era of the first real wave of celebrity rehab culture. Winona, Drew, Whitney, some go willingly, others are dragged. The media salivates. Headlines shame women more brutally than men. A young actress with a DUI is called a train wreck. A young actor is troubled. The language splits along the same old lines. Meanwhile, in bedrooms across the country, teenage girls pour peach schnapps into soda bottles and smuggle them to sleepovers. Girl drinks, they were called, because they taste like candy and go down like secrets. The fringe theory of the decade, that the rise of girl power coincided directly with the rise in casual binge drinking, not just among teens, but among adult women who were suddenly told they could be anything, including, apparently, blackout drunk in platform sandals. And while that sounds glib, the undercurrent is real. The idea that if you're not drinking, you're not participating. That social identity now includes alcohol as a core element, a shared language, a performance of adulthood. You leave the bar and walk a few blocks to a house party. It smells like incense, microwave popcorn, and anxiety. Women are clustered in the kitchen, pouring vodka into orange juice, debating whether Friends has any redeeming qualities, and discussing the merits of breaking up by voicemail. One woman, holding a beer she doesn't like, says, "If I had to feel all my feelings without drinking, I'd explode." No one disagrees. Later, you see Rachel in a corner, mascara smudged and laughing at something you didn't hear. Her glass is empty. She doesn't ask for another. She just refills it herself. Because that's what this decade offers, autonomy. It doesn't fix loneliness, but it lets you toast to surviving it. You walk home under a cloudy sky. Somewhere a car stereo plays Jewel. A woman is lying on her futon with a third glass of wine, watching a rerun and whispering to herself that she's fine, that she's free, that she doesn't miss anyone. She drinks, and in the stillness that follows, she dares to believe it. You wake up in the early 2000s, the Y2K panic barely behind you, and the scent of vanilla body spray still haunting the air. The internet is crawling through dial-up. Low-rise jeans are defying physics, and brunch is becoming a lifestyle. You're not in a smoky bar this time. You're in a sun-drenched rooftop restaurant, somewhere between urban chic and influencer fantasy. Welcome to the era of rosé all day, where women's drinking isn't just acceptable, it's marketable. You sit down at a table already littered with half-finished mimosas and lipstick-stained champagne flutes. The women here are polished, pre-brunch buzzed, and dressed like they fell into the clearance rack at B-Bay and emerged victorious. One of them, Lexi, or maybe it's Kelsey, raises a glass to no one in particular and yells, "To surviving another week of the patriarchy." Everyone laughs. They clink glasses. The waiter rolls his eyes. This is drinking as performance, as ritual, as female bonding with a capital B. No one sneaking sips from hidden flasks anymore. Now, women drink in Instagrammable lighting, with hashtag captions and matching shirts that say, "Why not?" It feels playful, even empowering, but sit with it long enough and you start to notice the cracks in the glass. Because this is also the decade where the wine glass becomes a meme, and not always in a healthy way. The birth of wine mum culture exudes across blogs, sitcoms and greeting cards. Mummy needs her juice. It's wine o'clock somewhere. The jokes are endless, self-deprecating, and just this side of sad. You're at a play date now. The kids are throwing crackers at a golden doodle. Two mums sit on the patio with oversized stemless glasses that could double as fish bowls. One says, "This is the only thing getting me through the week," and smiles. But the smile doesn't reach her eyes. The other nods, tops off her glass, and says nothing. Because this isn't about celebration anymore. It's about coping. Camouflaged as fun, drinking in the 2000s slides deeper into domesticity again. But with a fresh coat of glitter and sarcasm, it's no longer just socially acceptable for women to drink at home, it's expected. Wine is marketed as a reward, a necessity, an accessory to survival. You're a tired mum, a stressed out teacher, a burned out nurse. There's a Pinot Noir with your name on it, and a hoodie that says "Sip" happens to wear while you drink it. Meanwhile, single women are holding it down in different ways. You find yourself at a rooftop happy hour after work, surrounded by women in mid-tier corporate jobs. Swiping through early Tinder with one hand and gripping vodka sodas with the other, they toast to bad dates, bad bosses, and being too hot to care. But there's an edge underneath it all, the kind that whispers, "If I don't laugh about this, I'll cry in the bathroom stall again." Here's your historical fact. Between 2001 and 2013, the rate of alcohol use disorder in women in the US rose by 84% compared to a 35% increase in men. It wasn't just social drinking anymore, it was something deeper, but the conversation lagged behind the stats, because women drinking was still seen as a punchline, or worse, a Pinterest board. The quirky truth, this is the decade when alcohol brands start targeting women aggressively. Skinny girl cocktails, launched by a Real Housewife, promise you can drink and still fit into your jeans. Fruit-infused vodkas, glittery wine bottles, and beverages with names like Mum Water and Girls' Night In start flooding shelves. The idea is clear, drinking isn't just acceptable, it's feminine, it's chic, it's something you should be doing. And the scholarly debate? It simmers under all this pop culture froth. Are women drinking more because they're liberated, or because they're exhausted? Some researchers argue that the normalization of female drinking is progress, a sign of equality, independence, and social access. Others point out that this liberation looks suspiciously like numbing, that maybe the culture isn't empowering women to drink so much as it's pressuring them to drink just to survive it. Back at brunch, Lexi is on her fourth mimosa. She's talking about how she can't decide if she wants kids, how her job doesn't love her back, how dating is a horror show of ghosting and unsolicited photos. Then she laughs and says, "Anyway, thank God for champagne." You wonder if she means it. Later that evening, you're in someone's apartment, small, tidy, with fairy lights and a bottle of Merlot breathing on the counter like it's earned it. A woman in her mid-30s, working remotely, dating no one, climbing some version of a ladder. She's not sure leads anywhere, pours you a glass. She tells you she only drinks on weekends now, then she pours a second. You ask why she drinks. She shrugs. "Because I don't want to feel everything or nothing or whatever this is." She holds the glass like it's a life vest, like it keeps her afloat in the fog. And somewhere across the country, a woman is texting her friends in a group chat called Bitches Who Brunch. She's joking about how wine is cheaper than therapy. Everyone responds with emojis, but one of them leaves the conversation shortly after. No one asks why, because by now women know how to drink in public, in private, in curated casualness. They drink while watching The Bachelor, while applying mascara in ride shares, while unloading the dishwasher and wondering how this became normal. They know how to laugh it off, they just haven't been taught how to stop. You step outside, the night is soft. The sidewalks are wet from a brief rain. Somewhere a woman is googling hangover anxiety. Another is trying to remember if she told that guy too much. Another is asleep on the couch with her wine still in hand. They drink. Because this decade tells them they can, and never once asks as if they should. The year clicks forward like a faulty stopwatch, skipping and dragging in unequal parts until suddenly it's the 2020s. And you don't so much step into this decade as tumble into it head first, wrapped in uncertainty, face mask, hands sanitized, and quietly wondering if this is what the end of the world smells like. It's not a nightclub or a brunch bar you find yourself in now. It's a kitchen. Someone's kitchen. Maybe yours. And there, on the counter, is a bottle of wine, opened at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. Because this decade didn't arrive gently, it slammed the brakes on the planet, locked the doors, and handed everyone a bottle with a wink that said, "This should help." At first, it felt like a snow day. Banana bread. TikToks, Zoom happy hours with themed drinks and novelty mugs. You watch a woman on your screen raise her martini and laugh from her living room, wearing sweatpants and eyeliner. "We're surviving," she says, with a cheer in her voice and fear in her eyes. The pandemic became a permission slip. For women who had been holding it together for years, working jobs, raising kids, managing households, nurturing everyone but themselves, the lockdown was a bizarre cocktail of panic and pause. Suddenly, there were no more school runs, no more commutes, no more pretending everything was fine. And yet everything felt worse, which is how that first glass of wine at lunch became the second one before dinner, and the third one once the kids were asleep. The term quarantini is born, so is Mummy's home bar. Instagram lights up with posts of women in robes holding wine like trophies, captioned, "It's not drinking alone if the dog's here." And nobody flinches, because in this moment drinking is self-care. It's framed that way, pushed that way, bottled that way. You can even order it contact-free, delivered to your door in under 30 minutes. Alcohol is now an essential service, and so are the women who consume it. You're in the home of one such woman now. She's called Emma, late 30s, remote worker, 2 kids, 1 partner, 6 Zoom calls a door, 3 meals to cook, no time to think. She started ordering boxed wine because it's easier. It's also quieter. No clinking, no judgment, no evidence when she takes the trash out. She tells you she's fine, then she pours a glass that doesn't say fine at all, and she's not alone. Here's your historical fact. During the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, alcohol consumption in the US increased by 14% overall, but among women it jumped nearly 41%. Women reported higher rates of anxiety, depression and isolation than men, and alcohol became a lifeline disguised as a luxury. The cultural narrative followed suit. Online shops started selling novelty glasses that held an entire bottle. Etsy flooded with tumblers that read, "Wine because adulting is hard." TikTok bloomed with confessionals, funny, sad and somewhere in between, about drinking in the laundry room or mixing cocktails in travel mugs for grocery store runs. But slowly the jokes started to sour, because the hangovers got heavier. The morning fog became routine, that just one glass turned into, "I don't remember going to bed." And then, just as quickly as it had been normalised, the culture shifted again. Women started asking different questions. They Googled phrases like, "Am I drinking too much?" or "How to stop drinking without being boring." They downloaded sober-curious podcasts and joined private Reddit groups with names like, "We're not broken, we're just tired." And they began to whisper to each other, not about what they drank, but about why. You step into one of these groups now, a digital meeting, dozens of little squares filled with women sitting on their beds, their couches, their balconies. Some with wet hair, some with makeup, some crying. They're sharing stories, first sips, worst nights, last drinks. One woman says, "I didn't hit rock bottom, I just wanted to remember my evenings again." No one laughs, but everyone nods. The sober-curious movement grows. So does Dry January and brands start to notice. Non-alcoholic spirits, zero-proof cocktails, and social clubs built around mindfulness begin to crop up. Suddenly, choosing not to drink isn't suspicious, it's trending. But the tension is still there. Scroll through social media and it's a split screen. On one side, influencers holding wine glasses like fashion accessories. On the other, wellness gurus selling detox teas and mindful sobriety. The message is unclear: be wild, be well, be fun, be clean, and somehow, be all of it at once. The debate continues. Some scholars argue we're watching a reckoning unfold, that women are beginning to interrogate the relationship between modern feminism and alcohol, that we've been sold empowerment in a bottle, only to find that sometimes the cork doesn't come out clean. Others say this is just another swing of the pendulum, that women drink now because they can, because they want to, because for the first time in history, they're allowed to shape the narrative, whether that includes a glass in hand or not. And your fringe fact? There's now an app that lets women track not just their drinking, but their emotional triggers, down to the emoji. You can log your mood, your stress level, even whether you cried during a Subaru commercial. Data, it seems, has become the new conscience. Back in Emma's house, she's pouring water into a wine glass tonight. Not to trick herself, she says, just to change the feeling. She's 3 weeks dry, she's not calling herself sober, not yet. But she likes the quiet in her head. The way she remembers the end of movies now, the way her kids hug her without the faint smell of Chardonnay in her hair. She turns off the light and whispers, "Maybe this is what I've been missing." And across town, a younger woman is out at a rooftop bar sipping a canned cocktail labelled gluten-free, vegan, sustainable, 5% ABV. She's laughing with friends, posting a boomerang of her glass clinking another. It looks like freedom, and maybe tonight it is. Because here, in the complicated, screen-lit, wellness-obsessed, oversharing chaos of the 2020s, women are still drinking. Some more, some less, some not at all. And they're finally allowed to ask why. Allowed to stop, or to start again. Or to say, this drink is mine, and so is the choice. So here you are, lying back now, a little blurry-eyed from the journey. Thousands of years, dozens of names, hundreds of drinks, and one consistent truth. Women have always found a way to raise a glass, sometimes in secret, sometimes in celebration, sometimes because there was no other way to make it through the night. And whether it was hidden beneath linen in a Victorian parlour, or hoisted defiantly in a smoky bar in 1977, the glass never told the whole story. But it always held part of it. You're thinking now about the Egyptian priestesses, the Roman matrons sneaking sips behind silk curtains, the flappers, the factory girls, the housewives with vodka in the freezer labelled chicken stock. You're thinking about all the women who didn't get statues or books or footnotes, just a quiet moment to themselves and the soft burn of something stronger than tea, and you wonder how much of history was shaped in those moments, how many decisions, how many dreams, how many battles were softened or steeled by whatever waited at the bottom of a cup. Because drinking for women was never just about the drink. It was about space, agency, escape, community, resistance. Sometimes it was a lifeline, sometimes a trap, but always it was a mirror, reflecting the world's expectations back at them, one swirl of gin or Chardonnay at a time. Even now, with canned cocktails and zero-proof aperitifs and glow-in-the-dark wine tumblers, the legacy lingers. Maybe you felt it yourself, in that quiet tug toward the fridge after a long day, in the way women still trade wine recommendations like war stories, in the rituals that feel too small to matter, but still do. And no, this isn't a cautionary tale, it's a mosaic. A soft-spoken timeline of how women made room for themselves in a world that never poured them a drink without adding judgment, and how they learned slowly, sometimes painfully, to pour it anyway. So as you rest now, glass empty or untouched, eyes half closed, let yourself drift not with guilt or glamour, but with understanding, with a little awe, and with the quiet certainty that history isn't just in wars and dates and laws. It's in habits, in choices, in the clink of glass in a quiet room. Because somewhere, even tonight, a woman is taking a sip, alone or surrounded, or unsure, and writing her own small piece of this long, complicated story. And now, your part in that story, this part at least, can settle. Softly, slowly. Sleep, like the best kind of drink, should come easy now.